The shotgun blast shattered the mercantile window as Clara Monroe pressed her back against the counterglass, raining down like deadly diamonds. Outside, James Mallory, the cowboy every woman in Redstone desired, stood alone against 5 outlaws, his revolver smoking in the dusty street. "Get down, Clara!" he roared, but she was already reaching for her father's old Winchester. This was the moment that would reveal everything, his dark past, her hidden courage, and why his softest glance had always been for her alone. Stay with me, friends, as I tell you this tale of love and redemption in the Old West, and let me know in the comments which town you're watching from. I'd love to see how far our story travels tonight. The September sun hung low over Redstone, Colorado, painting the weathered storefronts in shades of amber and rust. It was the kind of evening that made the whole town seem to pause as if waiting for something momentous to happen. And on this particular evening in 1876, something did. James Mallory rode into town. Clara Monroe first saw him through the dusty window of her mercantile, her hand stilling on the bolt of calico she'd been measuring. The stranger sat his horse like he'd been born in the saddle, his weathered hat tipped just enough to shadow his eyes, a day's worth of trail dust coating his dark coat. But it wasn't his appearance that made her breath catch. Plenty of cowboys passed through Redstone. It was the way he moved, fluid and alert, like a mountain cat aware of every shadow. "Lord have mercy," breathed Mrs. Hutchinson, who'd been haggling over the price of flour. The older woman pressed her nose to the glass, her previous complaints about Clara's prices completely forgotten. "Now that's what I call a man." Clara turned back to her ledger, forcing her attention to the columns of numbers that suddenly seemed to swim before her eyes. "That's what you call a customer, Mrs. Hutchinson, if he stops here. Otherwise, he's just another drifter." But James Mallory wasn't just another drifter, and everyone in Redstone would know it soon enough. He dismounted in front of the Lucky Dollar Saloon, his spurs singing a metallic melody against the wooden boardwalk. Within minutes, word spread faster than wildfire. In August, a new gunslinger was in town, and not just any gunslinger. This was James Mallory, the man who'd supposedly outdraw 3 men in Dodge City and lived to tell the tale. The man who'd tracked the Hendricks brothers through a blizzard and brought them in alone. The man whose smile, they said, could make a nun reconsider her vows. By the time James pushed through the saloon's batwing doors, half the town's female population had found urgent business that required them to stroll past the Lucky Dollar. Clara watched from her doorway as Melody Sinclair, the mayor's daughter, practically floated by in her best blue dress parasol, twirling despite the evening shade. The Garrett sisters, all 3 of them, had suddenly decided they needed to water the flowers outside the seamstress shop next door, their giggles carrying on the breeze like birdsong. "Shameless," Clara muttered, though she couldn't quite tear her own gaze away from the saloon. She forced herself back inside, attacking the day's receipts with perhaps more vigor than necessary. Her store was her sanctuary, had been ever since her father died 2 winters past. Monroe's Mercantile and Dry Goods was the finest establishment of its kind between Denver and Cheyenne, or so her father had always claimed. Clara had kept it running despite the whispers that a young woman had no business managing such an enterprise alone. At 22, she'd heard it all. She should sell to Mr. Garrett. She should find a husband. She should accept that nice banker's son proposal before she became a permanent spinster. She'd rather eat nails. The bell above her door chimed, and Clara looked up from her ledger, ready with her shopkeeper's smile. It died on her lips. James Mallory stood in her doorway, hat in hand, the last rays of sunlight framing him like something out of a dime novel. Up close, she could see his eyes were the color of aged whiskey, with fine lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often or squinted into the sun while tracking outlaws. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling just over his collar, and there was a faint scar along his left jawline that somehow only added to his appeal. "Evening, ma'am," he said, "and Lord help her." His voice was like good bourbon, smooth and warm with just enough burn. "I'm hoping you might help me." Clara's hand went to her throat, checking that all her buttons were properly fastened. "Of course. What do you need?" "Ammunition primarily, the .45 caliber if you stock it. And—" He paused, those whiskey eyes scanning her well-organized shelves. "Soap. Trail soap, nothing fancy." "Nothing fancy," she repeated, moving toward the ammunition case with what she hoped was professional efficiency. "Most men new to town start with whiskey and cards." "I'm not most men." The words weren't boastful, just stated as simple fact. Clara's fingers fumbled with the key to the ammunition case. She could feel him watching her, not in the leering way some men did, but with a quiet intensity that made her hyper-aware of every movement. "You're Clara Monroe," he said, not a question. She glanced over her shoulder. "How did you be—" "Asked at the telegraph office who ran the best store in town. Samuel pointed me here, said Monroe's had everything a man could need." "Samuel's my cousin," Clara said, finally managing the lock. "He's biased." "Maybe. Or maybe he's just honest." She turned with the box of ammunition and found James had moved closer, though she hadn't heard his footsteps. This close, she could smell leather and gunpowder trail dust, and something uniquely masculine that made her stomach perform an alarming flutter. "The soap's in the back corner, she managed. Proud, her voice remained steady, next to the shaving supplies. He didn't move immediately, just studied her with those remarkable eyes. "You don't remember me, do you?" Clara's heart skipped. "Should I?" "Maybe not. It was 8 years ago, Denver. There was a rainstorm and a young lady's books went flying across Larimer Street. A cowboy helped her gather them up." The memory hit her like lightning. She'd been 14 in Denver with her father for supplies, carrying an armload of books she'd just purchased with her birthday money. The sudden storm had caught her off guard, and her precious books had scattered across the muddy street. She'd been near tears when a young cowboy, barely more than a boy himself, had jumped down from his horse to help her muddying his own clothes in the process. "That was you," she breathed. His smile transformed his face, and Clara understood instantly why women lost their heads over James Mallory. It wasn't just that he was handsome, though he certainly was. It was the way that smile seemed to promise adventure and safety in equal measure. "You were crying over a copy of Ivanhoe," he said, "worried the rain would ruin it before you could finish reading it. You gave me your coat to wrap them in." Clara remembered her voice soft. "I never got to thank you properly. You disappeared before I could. Had to catch up with my outfit. We were driving cattle north. And now you're here. Now I'm here." The moment stretched between them taut as a bowstring. Then the door burst open, bells jangling violently, and Melody Sinclair swept in with all the subtlety of a summer storm. "Why, Mr. Mallory?" she exclaimed, as if surprised to find him there, though Clara had seen her peering through the window. "What a pleasant surprise." James stepped back, his expression shifting to polite neutrality. "Miss, Sinclair, Melody Sinclair. My father's the mayor." She extended her gloved hand, forcing James to take it briefly. "I was hoping I might persuade you to join us for dinner tomorrow evening. Father's very eager to meet you." "That's kind, but—" "Oh, I insist. A man of your reputation, I mean your sterling reputation, simply must meet all the right people in Redstone." Melody's gaze flickered to Clara dismissively. "I'm sure Miss Monroe can finish helping you with your supplies." The emphasis on supplies suggested Clara's work was something akin to mucking out stables. Clara's spine stiffened, but before she could respond, James spoke. "Miss Monroe and I were just discussing literature, actually. She has excellent taste in books." Melody's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "Books? How unusual." "Not really," James said mildly. "I find a good book makes for better company than most dinner parties. No offense to your father, of course." The dismissal was gentle but clear. Melody's cheeks flushed pink. "Well, the invitation stands should you change your mind." She turned on her heel and flounced out the bell, protesting her dramatic exit. James watched her go, then turned back to Clara with a slight grimace. Does that happen often? What, Melody Sinclair acting like she owns the town daily? "I meant people assuming you're just here to fetch things for them." The observation was unexpectedly perceptive. Clara found herself really looking at him for the first time. Not at the legendary gunslinger or the handsome cowboy, but at the man who'd noticed something most people missed. "It's the nature of shopkeeping," she said carefully. "It's the nature of people underestimating you." He picked up the box of ammunition, examining it. "This is good quality. You know your inventory." "My father taught me. He believed a woman should know how to run a business, shoot straight, and read widely." "Smart man." "He was." James caught the past tense, his expression softening. "Recent 2 years this winter. I'm sorry. The simple sincerity in his voice almost undid her. Clara had heard 100 condolences, but something about the way James said it like he truly understood loss made her throat tight. The soap, she said briskly, needing to move. You still need soap. She led him to the back corner, aware of his presence behind her like heat from a stove. The early evening light slanted through the windows, painting golden bars across the floor. Outside, she could hear the town coming alive for the evening piano music from the saloon, laughter from the restaurant, the creak of wagons heading home. This is what you want, she said, reaching for a bar of plain lye soap. Is it? Something in his tone made her turn. He wasn't looking at the soap. He was looking at her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. It wasn't the bold, appraising look she'd seen from other men. It was softer, almost wondering, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. Mr. Mallory. James. James. His name felt dangerous on her tongue. Why are you really here? In Redstone, I mean. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the window. Sometimes a man gets tired of running toward trouble. Sometimes he wants to run toward something else. And what's that something else? His eyes found hers again. I'm still figuring that out. The bell chimed again, and this time it was Sheriff Daniels, his broad frame filling the doorway. Mallory thought I'd find you here. Sheriff? James acknowledged, his entire demeanor shifting. Where he'd been relaxed, almost playful, he was now alert, hand hanging loose near his holster. Relax, son. I'm not here to run you off. Just wanted to introduce myself properly. Tom Daniels. He extended a weathered hand which James shook. Heard about that business in Dodge. 3 men drawing on one hardly seems fair, Clara interjected, surprising herself. To them, I mean. Sheriff Daniels chuckled. I like this one, he said to James. She's got spine. Her daddy would have been proud. To Clara, he added, Don't let this one charm you too much, Miss Clara. Cowboys like him got a girl in every town. I don't, James said quietly. The simple statement hung in the air. Sheriff Daniels studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Well then, you planning on staying in town long? Depends on if I find work. Man, with your skills, I might have something. Come by my office tomorrow, we'll talk. The sheriff tipped his hat to Clara. Evening, Miss Clara. You close up before full dark, you hear? There's been trouble on the roads lately. After he left, Clara busied herself totaling James's purchases, her mind churning. James Mallory was dangerous not in the way the sheriff meant, but dangerous to her carefully ordered world. She'd built walls around her heart after her father died, focused on the store on survival, on proving everyone wrong who said she couldn't manage alone. $4.30, she said, proud of her steady voice. James placed the money on the counter, exact change. Thank you, Miss Monroe. Clara. Clara. Her name in his whiskey voice did something to her inside she didn't care to examine. That trouble the sheriff mentioned, is it serious? The Reeves gang. They've hit 2 towns north of here in the past month. Some say they're moving south. James went very still. Reeves? You know him. We've crossed paths, and his jaw tightened. You be careful. Reeves doesn't leave witnesses. The intensity in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. I'm always careful. Good. He gathered his purchases, then paused at the door. Clara, that book, Ivanhoe, did you ever finish it? 3 times. His smile returned softer this time, and Clara thought she might drown in it. Maybe you could recommend something new. I find myself with evening time to fill. Yes, of course. Tomorrow, then. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He touched the brim of his hat and was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of leather and possibility. Clara stood in her empty store, one hand pressed to her racing heart. Outside, she could hear the commotion as word spread that James Mallory had visited Monroe's mercantile. By tomorrow, everyone would know he'd stayed talking with her for nearly half an hour. The gossip would be insufferable. She didn't care. As she locked the ammunition case, Clara caught her reflection in the glass. Her brown hair was escaping its pins. Her practical gray dress was dusty from the day's work, and there was a smudge of ink on her cheek. She looked nothing like Melody Sinclair or the Garrett sisters with their perfect curls and pristine gowns. But James Mallory had remembered her from 8 years ago. He'd remembered the book she'd been crying over. The next morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and a buzz of excitement that had the whole town stirring early. Clara opened her store to find Mrs. Patterson, the Reverend's wife, already waiting outside. "My dear," Mrs. Patterson began without preamble, "is it true that Mr. Mallory spent considerable time here yesterday evening?" "He bought supplies," Clara said, unlocking the door, "as customers do." "But he stayed talking with you, alone. My dear, you must be more careful with your reputation." Clara turned to face the older woman directly. "My reputation has survived 2 years of running this store alone, Mrs. Patterson. I think it can survive selling soap to a cowboy." Mrs. Patterson sniffed. "That's precisely the attitude that keeps you unmarried at your age. Or maybe it's the attitude that keeps me sane." Before Mrs. Patterson could respond, the door chimed again. James walked in, hat in hand, and Clara's traitorous heart leaped. "Morning, ladies," he said pleasantly. "Mrs. Patterson, isn't it? I believe I saw you at the church yesterday." Mrs. Patterson practically glowed. "You attended service. Wouldn't miss it. Fine sermon about redemption." "Oh, well, yes, Reverend Patterson does give wonderful sermons." She was actually blushing. "Perhaps you'll join us for Sunday dinner." "That's kind of you, ma'am." Clara watched in amazement as James Mallory reported fastest gun in the West, charmed the unflappable Reverend's wife into a giggling schoolgirl. Within minutes, Mrs. Patterson was extolling his virtues and insisting he simply must meet her niece who was visiting from Boston. "I'll certainly consider it," James said solemnly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Miss Monroe promised to help me select some reading material." After Mrs. Patterson departed, still flutter, Clara shook her head. That was impressive. "What? You turned her from guardian of virtue to matchmaker in under 5 minutes." James grinned. "I've found that older ladies appreciate good manners. Also, I did attend church yesterday." "You did?" "Seemed like the right thing to do. Plus, I wanted to see what kind of town Redstone is." "And not that. It's a good town. Good people." He paused. "One person in particular." Before Clara could respond, the morning rush began. It seemed half the town had suddenly remembered urgent shopping needs. The Garrett sisters needed ribbon, all 3 of them requiring different colors that necessitated extensive consultation. Mr. Hoffman from the bank wanted tobacco, though he usually bought from the general store. Even Mayor Sinclair himself made an appearance ostensibly to discuss a large order for the upcoming Founders' Day celebration, but really to size up the famous gunslinger. Through it all, James remained in the store reading the titles on the small shelf of books Clara kept in the back corner. Occasionally he'd help her reach something from a high shelf or carry a heavy package to someone's wagon. He was unfailingly polite to everyone, but Clara noticed how he kept himself positioned where he could see both the door and windows, how his hand never strayed far from his gun. "You're expecting trouble," she said quietly when they had a moment alone. "I'm always expecting trouble. It's why I'm still alive. It must be exhausting. You get used to it." He picked up a copy of Shakespeare's sonnets, thumbing through it. "Do you carry any Jane Austen?" The question surprised her so much she laughed. "You read Jane Austen? A woman in Kansas recommended Pride and Prejudice, said it would teach me about the foolishness of first impressions. Was she right?" "Very much so." He looked at her directly. "I've been wrong about a lot of first impressions in my life. And now I try to look deeper." The bell chimed again, but this time the atmosphere changed instantly. 3 men entered, trail dusty and hard-eyed, spreading out in a way that made Clara's skin prickle. James had gone perfectly still, his hand resting casually on the counter near his holstered gun. "Help you, gentlemen?" Clara asked. Proud, her voice didn't shake. "Looking for someone," the leader said, his gaze fixed on James. "Heard there was a gunslinger in town, James Mallory." "You found him," James said easily, though Clara could see the tension in his shoulders. "Something I can do for you." "Maybe?" "We're looking for work. Heard the mines up north are hiring guards." "Then you should head north. The man smiled, showing too many teeth. Unfriendly town, this Redstone. Not unfriendly, James corrected. Just particular about the company we keep. The threat was subtle but clear. The three men exchanged glances, and Clara quietly moved her hand to the shotgun under the counter. James caught the movement, and something flickered in his eyes' approval. "We'll be moving on," the leader said finally, "but we'll be around, in case you change your mind about being friendly." They left, and Clara released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Friends of yours?" she asked. "No, but I know the type. They're scouting." "For what?" "For who? Reeves doesn't ride into a town blind. He sends men ahead to check defenses, see who might be a problem." James looked at her seriously. "Those men will report back that I'm here. That could be good or bad." "Why?" "Because Reeves and I have history. He'll either avoid the town or come looking for me specifically." "Which do you think?" James was quiet for a moment. "He'll come. Reeves doesn't like unfinished business." Clara felt a chill despite the warm morning. "Then you should leave." "Probably." "But you won't." His eyes found hers, and what she saw there made her breath catch. "No, I won't." "Why?" "You really have to ask." The question hung between them like a physical thing. Clara's hand was still on the shotgun, and James reached out, covering it gently with his own. His touch was warm, calloused, real. "I'm not good for you," he said softly. "I bring trouble wherever I go. You've built something good here, something clean and honest. I shouldn't—" "Shouldn't what?" Clara turned her hand under his, letting their fingers intertwine. "Shouldn't stay. Shouldn't give me a choice in the matter." "Clara, I've been making my own choices since I was 20 years old, James Mallory. Don't you dare try to make them for me now." He studied her for a long moment. Then his thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You're not what I expected to find in Redstone." "What were you expecting?" "Peace, quiet, a place to disappear for a while. And instead I found you." He released her hand reluctantly. "And now I can't seem to think about anything else." Heat flooded Clara's cheeks. "You barely know me. I know you cry over books. I know you stand up to busybodies and face down potential threats without flinching. I know you've kept this store running despite everyone saying you couldn't. I know you smell like lavender soap and printer's ink." He smiled slightly. "And I know you keep a shotgun under your counter, but probably know how to use that derringer in your skirt pocket better." Clara's hand went automatically to her pocket where the small gun rested. "How did you—" "The way your skirt hangs. Plus you're your father's daughter. He wouldn't have left you defenseless." "Most people underestimate me." "Most people are fools." The simple statement delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty did something to Clara's carefully constructed walls. She'd spent 2 years being strong, being independent, proving she didn't need anyone. But James wasn't offering to save her or protect her. He was simply seeing her. The morning continued with a steady stream of customers, but Clara was hyper-aware of James's presence. He eventually purchased the Shakespeare and a copy of David Copperfield, then settled into a chair in the corner to read. But she noticed how he positioned the chair to watch the street, how his gun hand remained free, how his apparent relaxation was actually coiled readiness. Around noon, Melody Sinclair reappeared this time with reinforcements. Her friends Alice and Catherine both dressed in their finest walking suits. "Mr. Mallory," Melody cooed, "still shopping." "Reading," he corrected without looking up. "Oh, how studious of you." She glanced at Clara dismissively. "I'm sure Miss Monroe needs her store space for actual customers." "I am an actual customer," James pointed out mildly. "Bought these books, didn't I?" "Well, yes, but surely you'd be more comfortable at the hotel or perhaps the restaurant. Catherine's father owns it, and I'm sure she could arrange a private table." Catherine giggled and blushed on cue. James finally looked up, his expression polite but distant. "I'm comfortable here, thank you. But—" "Miss Sinclair," Clara interrupted, her patience exhausted. "Unless you're here to make a purchase, I need to ask you to let my paying customer read in peace." Melody's eyes flashed. "You forget yourself, shopkeeper. No, I remember myself perfectly. This is my store and I decide who's welcome to stay. When my father hears about this, he'll what? James stood slowly, and even though his tone remained mild, something about his presence made the three women step back. He'll be upset that his daughter was harassing a local business owner. I'm sure the mayor values the merchants who keep this town running. Melody's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Finally, she spun on her heel. Come, ladies, we know where we're not wanted. After they left, Clara found herself laughing partly from relief and partly from the absurdity of it all. You know you just made an enemy of the mayor's daughter. I've had worse enemies. I can imagine, she sobered, but I have to live here after you leave. Something shifted in his expression. Who says I'm leaving? Aren't you men like you don't settle in towns like Redstone? Men like me, he repeated thoughtfully. Tell me, Clara, what kind of man do you think I am? It was a dangerous question, but Clara had never been one to back down from danger. I think you're running from something, or toward something, maybe both. I think you've done things you regret and things you're proud of, probably in equal measure. I think you're tired of being nothing more than your reputation. James was quiet for so long she thought she'd overstepped. Then, you see too much. Occupational hazard. You learn to read people when you run a store. And what do you read in me? Honestly. Always. Clara met his gaze directly. I see a good man who's convinced himself he's not. The silence stretched between them, loaded with unspoken words. Then James smiled, soft and genuine and devastating. You might be the first person in a long time to use good and my name in the same sentence. Then you've been talking to the wrong people. That evening, as Clara was closing the store, she found James still there, having moved to help her with inventory after the last customer left. You don't have to do this, she said as he lifted a heavy crate of canned goods. I know. Then why? He set the crate down and turned to her. The setting sun painted the store in shades of gold and shadow, and for a moment Clara forgot to breathe. Because, he said simply, this is the first place in 5 years where I've felt like myself instead of my reputation. Because you look at me like I'm just a man, not a legend or a threat or a prize to be won. Because, he stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Because I can't seem to stay away. Clara's heart was racing. James, I should go. This isn't fair to you. When Reeves comes, we'll face it, together. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what I've done, who I've been. Then tell me. The challenge hung between them. James looked at her for a long moment, then sank into a chair, suddenly looking older, more tired. 6 years ago, I rode with Reeves. Clara felt the words like a physical blow, but forced herself to remain still to listen. I was young, angry, thought the world owed me something. Reeves found me after I'd killed a man in self-defense, taught me to use my gun to survive. For 2 years, I was his right hand. What changed? We hit a homestead in Nebraska. Reeves gave the order to leave no witnesses. There were children, Clara. Twin boys couldn't have been more than 5. His voice had gone rough. I couldn't do it. I turned on the gang, got the family out, killed 2 of Reeves' men in the process. That's why he wants you dead. That's part of it. I also took something from him. Evidence of where he'd hidden money from a bank job. I sent it to the authorities anonymously. Half his gang got arrested because of it. Clara moved closer, drawn despite herself. You did the right thing. Did I? I still rode with him for 2 years, still did things I can't undo. But you changed. You chose to be better. That doesn't erase what I was. Knelt beside his chair, boldly taking his hand. No, but it defines who you are now. The man I see, he helps gather books in the rain. He charms elderly ladies and treats shopkeepers with respect. He stands ready to defend a town that isn't even his home. James turned his hand to grip hers. Clara, you don't understand. When Reeves comes, he won't just come for me. He'll hurt anyone close to me. Then we'd better make sure we're ready. You think I've kept this store running for 2 years by backing down from threats. I'm not some delicate flower, James. I'm Clara Monroe, and I protect what's mine. And am I yours? The question should have shocked her. They'd known each other for 2 days, had a handful of conversations, shared nothing more than touched hands. But Clara had learned to trust her instincts, and every instinct she had was screaming that this was right. "I think you could be," she said softly, "if you stayed long enough to find out." James lifted their joined hands, pressing his lips to her knuckles in a gesture so gentle it made her eyes burn. "You're going to be trouble for me, Clara Monroe. Good trouble, I hope. The best kind." A gunshot shattered the moment, followed by shouting from the street. James was on his feet instantly, gun drawn, pushing Clara behind him. "Stay here," he ordered, moving toward the door. "Like hell," Clara muttered, grabbing the shotgun from under the counter. They emerged to find chaos in the street. The three men from earlier were back this time with friends. They had the sheriff's deputy, young Billy Watson, on his knees in the dust, a gun to his head. "Mallory," the leader shouted. "Reeves wants to talk. You've got 2 days to decide, join us or face us. We'll be at Skeleton Ridge." "Let the boy go," James called back, his voice steady. "He's got nothing to do with this. Everything in this town has to do with this now." The man smiled coldly. 2 days, Mallory. Come alone or we burn this pretty little town to the ground." They released Billy with a shove that sent him sprawling, then mounted up and rode out, their laughter echoing in the evening air. James helped Billy to his feet while townspeople emerged from buildings, voices rising in fear and anger. Sheriff Daniels appeared, his face grim. "Inside," he said tersely. "Town meeting now." As they filed into the church, the largest building in town, Clara stayed close to James. She could feel the tension radiating off him, see the weight settling on his shoulders. "This is my fault," he murmured. "No," Clara said firmly. "This is Reeves's fault. You're just the excuse." The church filled quickly, voices echoing off the rafters. Mayor Sinclair took the pulpit, his political smile nowhere in evidence. "Folks, we need to face facts. The Reeves gang is coming, and we need to decide how to respond." "It's obvious, isn't it?" Mr. Garrett stood, his face red. "Mallory brought this trouble. He should leave." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Now hold on," Sheriff Daniels interjected. "James Mallory hasn't broken any laws. We don't run people out of town based on threats from outlaws." "But if he leaves, they'll leave us alone," Mrs. Patterson said, wringing her hands. "Will they—" Clara stood, her voice carrying clearly. "The Reeves gang has hit 2 towns already. Were they looking for Mr. Mallory then? Or were they just looking for easy targets?" "What are you saying, William?" Mayor Sinclair asked. "I'm saying they're coming regardless. The only question is whether we face them with one of the best gunmen in the territories on our side, or whether we face them alone." "You're just sweet on him," Melody Sinclair called out, earning scattered laughter. Clara's chin lifted. "Maybe I am. That doesn't make me wrong." James stood slowly, and the room fell silent. "Miss Monroe makes a good point, but so does Mr. Garrett. I did bring this trouble, even if it would have come eventually. So I'll make you a deal." "What kind of deal?" Sheriff Daniels asked. "Give me the 2 days. Let me try to settle this with Reeves one way or another. If I fail, if I don't come back, you can truthfully say I'm gone and hope they move on. And if you succeed," James's smile was sharp as a blade, "then you'll have one less gang to worry about." "You can't face them alone," Sheriff Daniels protested. "That's suicide." "Maybe, but it's my choice." "No." Clara's voice cut through the murmurs. "It's not just your choice. This is our town, our fight." "Clara, I vote we stand and fight," she continued, ignoring him. "Together, all of us." "You're talking about war, young lady," Mayor Sinclair said gravely. "No, I'm talking about survival, about defending what we've built here." She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of people she'd known all her life. "Yes, we could give them what they want, hope they go away. But what happens the next time outlaws come, and the time after that? Do we just keep giving in?" "The girl's got a point, old Pete," the blacksmith rumbled. "I didn't build my forge just to hand it over to the first bandit who asks." "I've got 2 daughters," Mr. Chen from the laundry said quietly. "I won't have them growing up in a town that bows to outlaws." One by one, voices rose in agreement. Not everyone, some still argued for James to leave for appeasement for hiring mercenaries. But slowly, a consensus formed. "We fight," Sheriff Daniels declared finally. "But we do it smart." Mallory, you'll work with me on defense plans. Everyone else, you've got jobs to do. We've got 2 days to turn Redstone into a fortress. As the meeting broke up, James caught Clara's arm. That was brave and foolish. You're welcome. Clara, I'm serious. You don't know what you've just signed up for. She turned to face him, fully aware that people were watching, but not caring. Yes, I do. I've signed up to defend my home, and maybe, just maybe, to keep a certain cowboy from getting himself killed out of some misguided sense of nobility. Is that what you think I have? I think you were ready to die to protect this town. That's either nobility or stupidity, and you don't strike me as stupid. James laughed, surprising them both. You are going to be so much trouble. You mentioned that already. Bears repeating. He sobered. If we survive this, when we survive this, he corrected, you and I are going to have a long conversation about the future. Clara's heart skipped. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation that transformed Redstone from a peaceful frontier town into an armed camp. Clara barely had time to think about the promise in James's words as she worked alongside the other townspeople, boarding windows, filling sandbags, and distributing ammunition from her store's supplies. Yet every time she caught sight of him across the street, teaching men how to set up defensive positions or checking sight lines from the rooftops, her pulse quickened with something that had nothing to do with the coming danger. James had taken up residence in the sheriff's office, poring over maps with Sheriff Daniels late into the night. Clara brought them coffee and sandwiches, using any excuse to be near him to reassure herself he was still there, still planning to stay and fight rather than face Reeves alone. You need to sleep, she told him on the second night, finding him alone at the sheriff's desk, studying a diagram of the town by lamplight. Can't, he said without looking up. Too much to do. The town won't be any safer if you collapse from exhaustion. But it'll be considerably less safe if I miss something because I was sleeping. He finally raised his eyes to hers, and she was struck by how tired he looked, how the weight of responsibility had etched new lines around his eyes. Reeves knows how I think. I taught him half his tactics. I need to be 3 steps ahead, and right now I'm barely managing 1. Clara moved around the desk boldly, placing her hands on his shoulders. She felt him tense, then slowly relax as she began to massage the knots from his muscles. Tell me about him, she said quietly. Not the outlaw everyone fears. Tell me about the man. James was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Tom Reeves was charming, educated even. He could quote poetry and Shakespeare, discuss philosophy and politics. That's what made him dangerous. He could make robbery sound like revolution, murder like justice. You admired him. Once. He found me when I was angry at the world, gave me purpose, direction. He was the older brother I never had. His voice turned bitter. Until I realized his purpose was nothing but greed dressed up in pretty words. What was he like with you specifically? Possessive. He called me his protege, his greatest creation. When I turned on him, James shook his head. It wasn't just betrayal to him. It was personal. I took his investment and threw it back in his face. Clara's hands stilled on his shoulders. He won't let you live. No. Even if you offered to rejoin him. Especially then. He'd make an example of me, show everyone what happens to those who betray Tom Reeves. James reached up, covering one of her hands with his. That's why you need to leave town tomorrow. You and the other women and children. We've been through this, Clara interrupted. I'm not leaving. Clara. Do you know what the women are doing while you men plan your defensive positions? She moved around to face him, her hands on her hips. We're loading ammunition, preparing medical supplies, setting up water stations. Mrs. Chen is organizing the children into bucket brigades in case of fire. Mrs. Patterson is turning the church into a field hospital. We're not delicate flowers waiting to be rescued, James. We're fighting for our home, too. You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Thank you. Despite everything, he smiled. It wasn't entirely a compliment. I choose to take it as one. She grew serious. James, whatever happens tomorrow, don't. He stood pulling her against him in one fluid motion. Clara gasped at the sudden contact, at the solid warmth of him, at the way her body fit perfectly against his. Don't say goodbye. Not yet. I wasn't going to. She whispered, her hands flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing as fast as hers. I was going to say that whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad you rode into town. I'm glad I got to know the man behind the legend. Clara. Her name was a prayer on his lips. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. You deserve better than a gunslinger with blood on his hands. I deserve a man who sees me as more than a shopkeeper or a potential wife, a man who respects my choices and my strength. She met his gaze steadily. I deserve you, James Mallory, if you'll have me. His control finally broke. James pulled her closer and kissed her with a desperation that spoke of tomorrow's uncertainty and today's need. Claire had been kissed before chaste pecks from would-be suitors, but this was different. This was fire and promise, and a claiming that went both directions. She fisted her hands in his shirt, anchoring herself as the world spun around them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. When this is over, he said roughly, when Reeves is dealt with, I'm going to court you properly. Flowers and Sunday dinners and all of it. I don't need all of that. But you deserve it. You deserve everything. He kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a demand. Go home, Clara. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we win, she said firmly. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it an unnatural quiet that settled over Redstone like a shroud. Clara stood in her store checking her father's Winchester for the 10th time. She dressed practically a split skirt for riding sturdy boots, her father's old leather vest that might stop a knife, if not a bullet. The Derringer was in her pocket, a knife in her boot, and enough ammunition to last through a siege. The plan was simple in its complexity. The women and children who couldn't fight were barricaded in the church with Mrs. Patterson. Every man who could hold a gun was positioned at strategic points throughout town. James would be in the street, the bait to draw Reeves in with Sheriff Daniels, and the best shots providing cover from the rooftops. Clara's job was to guard the back entrance to the main street, preventing anyone from flanking their position. It was supposed to be safe, or as safe as anything could be in a gunfight. James had insisted on it, and she'd agreed knowing he'd be distracted if she were in the main line of fire. The morning sun climbed higher and tension wound tighter with each passing minute. Then finally a dust cloud appeared on the horizon. They're coming, Billy Watson called from his position on the hotel roof. Clara watched from her window as James stepped into the middle of the main street, positioning himself with deliberate care. He changed into a black shirt and vest, his guns gleaming at his hips, looking every inch the legendary gunslinger. But she knew him now, knew the man beneath the reputation, and her heart clenched with fear she refused to show. The Reeves gang rode in slowly, spreading out in a practiced formation. Clara counted 15 men, all armed, all dangerous. Tom Reeves himself was in the center, and she understood immediately what James had meant about his charm. Even from a distance, Reeves cut an impressive figure, tall, well-dressed with silver at his temples, that gave him a distinguished air. He could have been a banker or a senator, if not for the cold calculation in his eyes. James? Reeves called out, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. My wayward son returns. I'm not your son, Tom. Never was. No, I made you what you are, taught you everything. You taught me how to kill. I had to learn how to live on my own. Reeves laughed, rich and genuinely amused. Still so dramatic. You always did have a poet's soul. It's what made you weak. Compassion isn't weakness. Isn't it? Look where it's brought you, standing alone in a dusty street about to die for people who mean nothing to you. That's where you're wrong, James said quietly, but his voice carried. They mean everything. Clara's breath caught. Even facing death, he was thinking of them, of her. Touching, Reeves said dryly, but pointless. Here's my offer, James. Come with me now, and I'll spare the town. Refuse, and we burn it to the ground after we kill you. Counter offer, James said. You and your men ride out now, and I don't kill you all. Reeves laughed again, but this time there was an edge to it. You always did have audacity. Very well. We do this the hard way. The morning exploded into violence. Clara would remember it later in fragments, the thunderous crash of gunfire, the acrid smell of gunpowder, the screams of horses and men. James drew with inhuman speed, dropping 2 men before they cleared leather. The rooftops erupted as Sheriff Daniels and his men opened fire, catching the gang in a deadly crossfire. But Reeves had expected this. Half his men peeled off, heading for the side streets, trying to flank the defenders. Clara saw 3 riders heading for her position and raised the Winchester her father's training taking over. The first man went down with her first shot, tumbling from his saddle. The second fired back his bullet, splintering the doorframe inches from her head. Clara didn't flinch, working the lever and firing again. The third man tried to rush her, and she met him with the shotgun she'd positioned by the door, the blast throwing him backward into the street. Behind her, she heard glass breaking, someone trying to come through the back. She spun Derringer in hand and fired twice. The would-be intruder stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. The shopkeeper's armed. He shouted, warning others. Good, Clara thought grimly, reloading with hands that barely trembled. The battle raged on. From her position, she could see portions of the main street where James fought with a lethal grace that was terrible and beautiful to watch. He moved constantly, never giving anyone a clear shot, his guns speaking death with every pull of the trigger. But there were so many of them, and even with the town's defenders, they were outnumbered. Then she saw it, Reeves himself circling around trying to get behind James. Without thinking, Clara abandoned her position and ran into the street. "James, behind you!" He spun at her warning, firing in one smooth motion. Reeves's gun flew from his hand as James's bullet struck it. But the distraction cost him. One of Reeves' men, wounded but not dead, raised his gun toward James's exposed back. Clara didn't remember raising the Winchester. She only remembered the kick against her shoulder and the man falling his shot going wide. But her position in the open made her a target. She heard Reeves shout something, saw men turning toward her. James was there in an instant, tackling her behind a water trough as bullets whined overhead. "I told you to stay in position," he growled, even as he shielded her with his body. "You're welcome for saving your life. You infuriating woman." Whatever else he might have said was lost as Reeves called out, enough shooting!" An eerie quiet fell over the town. Clara peered around the trough to see Reeves standing in the open, his hands visible but ready to draw his backup gun. "This has gone on long enough," Reeves said. "You and me, James. The way it should have been from the beginning. Winner takes all, the town, the girl, everything." "No," Sheriff Daniels called from his position. "We don't do duels here." "Then I order my men to burn everything," Reeves interrupted coldly. "Starting with that church where you've hidden your families." Clara felt James go rigid beside her. She knew what he was thinking, knew he'd never risk the innocent lives in that church. "James, no," she whispered urgently. "It's what he wants." "I know." He looked at her, and the expression in his eyes broke her heart. "But it's the only way. You could lose." "I won't." He touched her face gently. "Not with you watching, not with everything I have to live for now." Before she could respond, he stood stepping into the open. "Terms. Simple. You and me, Main Street classic rules. When someone drops a handkerchief, we draw. And when I win, your men leave. All of them. Forever." "If you win," Reeves corrected, "which you won't. You never could beat me in practice." Practice is different from the real thing. As the 2 men took their positions, the entire town seemed to hold its breath. Clara found herself standing with the other townspeople who had emerged from cover Sheriff Daniels on one side, Mrs. Patterson, who had left the church despite orders, on the other. "Can he do it?" Mrs. Patterson whispered. Clara didn't answer. She was watching James, seeing the subtle shift in his stance, the way his hand hung loose and ready. But she was also watching Reeves, seeing his confidence, his absolute certainty of victory. Mayor Sinclair, his face pale but determined, held up a white handkerchief. "Gentlemen, ready." Both men nodded, their eyes locked on each other. The handkerchief fluttered in the morning breeze, seeming to fall in slow motion. Clara's heartbeat thundered in her ears, drowning out everything else. The handkerchief touched the ground. The draw was faster than thought, faster than prayer. Clara saw James's hand move, saw the glint of sunlight on metal, heard the thunder of gunshots so close together they sounded like one. For a moment, both men stood frozen. Then Reeves looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, surprise replacing arrogance on his face. You learn new tricks." I learned what was worth fighting for, James replied, his gun still trained on the dying man. Reeves fell to his knees, then forward into the dust. For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of Reeves' men made the mistake of reaching for his gun. James's second gun was in his hand before anyone could blink, pointed at the man's head. Don't. Your boss is dead. You can ride out alive or join him. Choose. The town, the man asked. Leaves with you. Touch nothing. Take nothing. Never come back. One by one, the remaining gang members holstered their weapons, gathered their dead and wounded, and rode out. The dust from their departure hadn't settled before the town erupted in celebration. But Clara only had eyes for James, who stood swaying in the street, his guns finally holstered. She ran to him as he sank to one knee, and that's when she saw the blood on his side. You're hit. Reeves was always fast, he said through gritted teeth, just not fast enough. Dr. Morrison, Clara shouted, supporting James's weight. We need the doctor. The next hours blurred together, getting James to the doctor's office, the agonizing wait, while the bullet was removed, the constant stream of townspeople coming to check on their hero. Through it all, Clara never left his side, holding his hand through the surgery, bathing his forehead when fever threatened, praying wordlessly that she hadn't found him, only to lose him. It was near sunset when he finally woke fully, his eyes focusing on her face. Clara, I'm here. She squeezed his hand, tears she'd been holding back finally falling. You stupid, brave, wonderful man, you nearly died. Worth it, he murmured, reaching up to touch her cheek. The town's safe. You're safe. If you ever scare me like that again, marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's breath caught. What? I know it's not the proper proposal you deserve, James said, his voice stronger now, more certain. I don't have flowers or a ring or even clean clothes, but I nearly died today, and the only thing I could think about was that I hadn't told you I love you, that I hadn't asked you to be my wife. James, I love you, Clara Monroe. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you look at me like I'm more than my past. I love that you cry over books and stand up to outlaws and make terrible coffee but excellent sandwiches. He struggled to sit up, wincing but determined. I don't have much to offer, just a gunslinger's savings and more baggage than any woman should have to carry. But if you'll have me, I promise to spend every day proving you made the right choice. Clara was crying fully now, not caring who saw. You infuriating man, she managed. Yes, 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 I'll marry you. Yes to all of it, but only if you promise to stop getting shot. I'll do my best, he said, pulling her down for a kiss that was tender and full of promise. Sheriff Daniels cleared his throat from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but the whole town's waiting to hear if he's going to live. He'll live, Dr. Morrison said dryly, entering behind the sheriff. If only because Miss Clara won't let him do otherwise, though I recommend at least a week of bed rest. A week? James protested. A week, Clara said firmly. Doctor's orders. And who's going to run the store? Melody Sinclair, actually, Clara said, surprising everyone, including herself. She came by earlier while you were unconscious, apologized for her behavior, and offered to help. I think seeing you nearly die for the town gave her some perspective. Wonders never cease, James murmured. Over the next days, as James recovered, the town of Redstone transformed around them. The story of the showdown with Reeves spread quickly, drawing journalists and curiosity seekers from across the territory. But more importantly, it drew families looking for a safe place to settle businesses, looking to establish themselves in a town that had proven it would fight for its survival. James was offered the position of sheriff when Daniels announced his retirement, but he turned it down, suggesting Billy Watson for the job instead. I've worn a badge before, he told the town council, but I think I'm done with that life. What will you do? Mayor Sinclair asked. James looked at Clara and smiled. I thought I might try my hand at shopkeeping. I hear Monroe's Mercantile might be expanding, maybe even opening a second location. Could use a partner. Clara tried to look stern but failed entirely. A partner who knows books and can reach the high shelves. Exactly. They were married 2 months later on a crisp December morning with the whole town in attendance. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress altered to fit, and James wore a new black suit that made him look distinguished rather than dangerous. Reverend Patterson performed the ceremony. Mrs. Patterson cried through the entire thing, and even Melody Sinclair had to dab at her eyes when James spoke his vows. "Clara," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the packed church, "you saw past the gunslinger to find the man. You gave me a reason to stop running a place to call home and a future I never dared dream of. I promise to love you, protect you, and probably drive you crazy with my stubborn ways for the rest of our days." Clara laughed through her tears. "James, you saved more than just our town. You saved me from a life of mere existence. You showed me that some risks are worth taking, that love is worth fighting for, and that the best things in life often come riding in on a dusty afternoon when you least expect them. I promise to love you, challenge you, and definitely drive you crazy with my stubborn ways for the rest of our days." When Reverend Patterson pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up could probably be heard in the next county. The reception was held at Monroe's Mercantile now. Mallory and Monroe's Mercantile, though everyone still called it Monroe's. The shelves had been pushed back, lanterns hung from every beam, and the whole town crowded in to celebrate. Old Pete had fashioned a horseshoe into a heart. As a wedding gift, the Chen family provided silk flowers from San Francisco, and Sheriff Daniels presented James with a special gift, a full pardon from the territorial governor for any past crimes secured through Daniels' connections. "So you can stop looking over your shoulder," Daniels said quietly. "A man needs to be able to focus on his future, not his past." As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, Clara found a moment of quiet with her new husband on the store's back porch, looking out at the town they'd fought to protect. "Any regrets?" James asked, his arm around her waist. "Only one," Clara said. He tensed. "What?" "I wish my father could have met you. Really met you, not just that brief encounter in Denver." James relaxed, pulling her closer. "I think he did meet me in a way. Every time you stood up to danger, every time you made a choice he taught you to make, he was there." "When did you become so philosophical?" "When I married a woman who reads Shakespeare for fun." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Clara said, "James, that first day when you came into the store, were you really just looking for ammunition and soap?" He chuckled. "I'd heard about you from Samuel at the telegraph office, the beautiful, stubborn shopkeeper who wouldn't sell to anyone. I was curious. So you did remember me from Denver." "Clara, I've remembered you every day for 8 years. When I heard a Miss Monroe ran the Mercantile here, I had to know if it was you." She turned in his arms to face him. "And if it hadn't been, then I would have bought my soap and moved on. But it was you, and the moment I saw you again, I knew my running days were over. Even knowing it would bring Reeves here, especially then, because for the first time in my life I had something worth fighting for, something worth risking everything for." Clara kissed him, then pouring all her love and gratitude and promise into it. When they broke apart, the sound of music drifted from inside. Someone had brought a fiddle and dancing had begun. "Mrs. Mallory," James said formally, offering his arm, "would you honor me with a dance?" "Mr. Mallory," she replied, equally formal. "I thought you'd never ask." They danced until dawn, surrounded by their neighbors who had become family in the store that had become their kingdom, in the town that had become their home. And if sometimes James's hand drifted to where his gun used to rest, or if Clara still kept a derringer in her pocket, even at her own wedding, well, some habits died hard. But as the sun rose on their first day as husband and wife, painting Redstone in shades of gold and possibility, one thing was certain: the gunslinger who every woman had wanted had chosen the shopkeeper who hadn't been looking for him, and in that choosing both had found themselves. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Clara would smile and say, "Your father came in looking for soap and left with my heart." And James would add, "And your mother saved my life in more ways than one." The children would roll their eyes, having heard the story 1,000 times, but secretly they loved it. The tale of the cowboy and the shopkeeper, of courage and choice, of a love that faced down outlaws and won. Because, in the end, that's what all the best love stories are. Two people choosing each other again and again against all odds, until the choosing becomes as natural as breathing, as essential as sunrise, as eternal as the Colorado mountains that watched over the town of Redstone. The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of small miracles and everyday contentments that Clara had never dared imagine for herself. James proved to be surprisingly adept at shopkeeping his memory for faces and names, serving him well with customers who had initially come to gawk at the famous gunslinger and stayed because he treated them with genuine respect. He had a particular gift with the children who gathered around him whenever he unpacked new shipments, eager to hear stories that he somehow made educational rather than violent. But the past had a way of casting shadows, even in the brightest moments. Clara first noticed it on a particularly busy Saturday in March, when a group of trail hands passed through town. One of them, weathered and scarred, stopped dead in the doorway of the store when he saw James behind the counter. "Mallory, James Mallory." James's hand didn't move to where his gun used to rest, but Clara saw the tension ripple through his shoulders. "That's right. Can I help you?" "You don't remember me, do you?" The man stepped closer, and Clara quietly moved her hand to the shotgun they still kept beneath the counter. "Fort Worth 3 years back. You killed my brother." The store went silent. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been examining fabric, froze mid-reach. Young Billy Watson, now Sheriff Watson, appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the tension. James set down the ledger he'd been writing, in his movements deliberate and calm. "What was your brother's name?" "Jake Morrison." "Jake Morrison," James repeated slowly, and Clara saw recognition dawn in his eyes. He was drawing on an unarmed man, a settler who'd won at cards fair and square. "That's what you say. That's what happened. Your brother was drunk, angry, and about to murder an innocent man. I gave him a chance to walk away. He chose to draw instead." The trailhand's face worked through several emotions before settling on weary acceptance. "Yeah, that sounds like Jake. Hothead even when we were kids." He removed his hand from his gun. "I ain't here for revenge, Mallory. Just wanted to look you in the eye, see what kind of man you were. And you're different than I expected. Heard you settled down turned shopkeeper. Didn't believe it till I saw it myself." "People change," James said simply. "Some do," the man agreed. He looked around the store, taking in Clara the normal domesticity of it all. "Jake wouldn't have. You probably saved other lives by taking his." He tipped his hat. "Ma'am, sorry for the disturbance." After he left, the store remained quiet until Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. "Well, I'll take 3 yards of the blue calico, Mr. Mallory." And just like that, life resumed. But Clara saw how James's jaw remained tight for the rest of the day, how he was quieter than usual at dinner that evening. "How many more are out there?" she asked finally, as they prepared for bed. "How many brothers, friends, associates who might come looking for James Mallory?" "I don't know," he admitted, sitting on the edge of their bed. "I've tried to count, sometimes tried to remember every face, every name. But those years with Reeves and the years after, when I was trying to build a reputation that would keep me safe, they blur together." Clara moved behind him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. "We knew this might happen. Knowing and experiencing are different things. When he walked in today for a moment, I was afraid not for me, but for you, for what you might see, what you might learn about who I was. James," she turned his face toward her, "I know who you were. More importantly, I know who you are. The man who helps Mrs. Chen carry her laundry baskets. The man who teaches the Carter boys to read using adventure novels. The man who still gets up at dawn to check the town's perimeter just in case." "Old habits," he murmured. "Good habits. You protect what you love. That hasn't changed, just the methods." He pulled her into his lap, burying his face in her hair. "What did I do to deserve you? You chose to be better, and you keep choosing it every day." Spring arrived with unexpected news that would test that choice in ways they couldn't have anticipated. Clara realized she'd missed her monthly courses twice before the morning sickness confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. She found James in the storeroom inventorying their ammunition stock, another old habit that died hard. "James," he looked up, immediately alert to something in her tone. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. At least I don't think so. I hope not." She was babbling, nervous in a way she hadn't been since their wedding. "I'm pregnant." The box of bullets slipped from his hands, cartridges scattering across the floor with a metallic cascade. James stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions too quickly for her to read. "Pregnant," he repeated as if the word were foreign. "Yes. Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to be sure before I told you. A baby. Our baby. Yes. He crossed to her in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around before suddenly setting her down with excessive care. Should you be standing? Should you sit? Do you need anything? Clara laughed, the knot of anxiety in her chest loosening. I'm pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. Not my woman. Not with my child. His hands framed her still flat stomach with reverence. When October, Dr. Morrison thinks. A baby, James said again, wonder in his voice. Then his expression shifted, shadows creeping in. Clara, what if it's like me? What if there's something dark in the blood that... Stop. She placed her fingers over his lips. Our child will be who they choose to be, just like you chose. And they'll have something you didn't, 2 parents who love them, a stable home, a whole town to help raise them. The town, James said suddenly. What will people say? The gunslinger's child. Will be the shopkeeper's child too, and the hero of Redstone's child. And their own person most of all. James kissed her, then deep and desperate and full of promise. When they broke apart, he kept her close. I'm going to be a terrible father. I don't know anything about children. You're wonderful with the town children. That's different. They go home at the end of the day. This one will be ours all the time. Terrifying, isn't it? Absolutely. He smiled then, that soft smile she'd learned was just for her. And wonderful. News of the pregnancy spread through Redstone like wildfire. Within a day, Clara was inundated with advice, hand-me-down baby clothes, and enough preserved food to last through winter. Even Melody Sinclair, now married to a banker from Denver, but visiting her parents, stopped by with an expensive baby blanket from San Francisco. I'm happy for you, Melody said, and seemed to mean it. You got what all of us wanted, not just James Mallory, but the real man underneath. He was never really hiding, Claire replied. People just had to look past the legend. Maybe. Or maybe you're the only one who made him want to be seen. The months that followed were a mixture of joy and adjustment. James became increasingly protective as Clara's pregnancy progressed to the point where she had to ban him from following her around the store. I can still lift a bolt of fabric, she insisted in July, her belly now prominently round. Dr. Morrison said you should be careful. He said I should be sensible. There's a difference. Not when it comes to you and our child. Their child. He said it with such wonder every time, as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. The summer heat was particularly brutal that year, and Clara found herself grateful for James's hovering when she nearly fainted while reaching for something on a high shelf. He caught her before she fell, carrying her to their quarters above the store despite her protests. I can walk. Humor me, he said tersely, and she realized he was genuinely frightened. James women have babies every day. Other women aren't you. He settled her on their bed, bringing a cool cloth for her forehead. I've faced down outlaws, been shot multiple times, tracked through blizzards. None of it scared me like the thought of losing you. You won't lose me. Promise? I promise to do everything in my power to stay with you and our child. That's not the same as promising. It's the best I can offer. Life doesn't come with guarantees, James. You know that better than anyone. He was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby kicked and his face lit up with that wonder she never tired of seeing. He's strong, James said. Or she. Either way strong, like their mother. And their father. Summer gave way to autumn, and with it came an unexpected visitor. Clara was arranging a display of harvest goods when a woman entered the store, elegant, beautifully dressed, with the bearing of someone used to being noticed. She was perhaps 40, with threads of silver in her dark hair and eyes the exact shade of James's. You must be Clara, then, the woman said. Yes. Can I help you? I'm Margaret Thornton, James's sister. Clara's hand went to her throat. James doesn't have, he said he didn't have family. He doesn't, as far as he's concerned. I'm sure he never mentioned me. We haven't spoken in 15 years. Margaret's composure cracked slightly. Is he here? He's at the bank. He'll be back soon. Then perhaps we could talk first. Woman to woman. Clara studied her, noting the expensive clothes, the wedding ring with its large diamond, the way she held herself like someone who'd climbed high and was determined never to fall. "Would you like some tea?" They sat in the small parlor behind the store, and Margaret told her story in measured tones. She was 5 years older than James, had left home at 16 to marry a wealthy rancher. "I thought I was saving myself," she said bitterly. "Our father was a drunk, our mother dead. James was 11, already wild, already angry. I told myself he'd be fine, that he was tough. I abandoned him." "You were a child yourself," Clara said gently. "I was old enough to know better, old enough to take him with me. But my husband wouldn't have wanted a wild boy around, and I chose comfort over family." She set down her teacup with a trembling hand. "I heard about what happened in Denver about him joining Reeves. I told myself it wasn't my fault, but I knew better. If I'd been there, he might have ended up exactly the same," Clara interrupted. "James chose his own path, the good and the bad. Blaming yourself serves no purpose." "You're kind to say so, but I know what I did, or didn't do." Margaret looked at Clara's obvious pregnancy. "That's why I'm here. I heard he'd married, settled down. I needed to see for myself to know he'd found the family I failed to give him." The door chimed, and James's voice called out, "Clara, where?" He stopped dead in the doorway, his face going pale, then flushing with anger. "Margaret." "Hello, James." "Get out." "James," Clara said softly, but he didn't look at her. "I said get out. You don't get to walk in here after 15 years and—" "I know," Margaret said, standing. "I know I have no right. I just needed to see you to know you were well. I'm fine. No thanks to you." "James," Clara said again, stronger this time. She struggled to her feet, one hand on her back. "Hear her out." "There's nothing to hear. She made her choice. As did you, as we all do." Clara moved to him, taking his rigid hand. "But choices can be forgiven." "She left me," James said, and for a moment Clara heard the abandoned 11-year-old boy. "She left me with him." "I did," Margaret said simply. "It was unforgivable." "I'm not asking for forgiveness, James. I'm asking for a chance to know my brother again, to know my sister-in-law, to maybe know my niece or nephew. Not because I deserve it, but because I hope you're a better person than I was." James was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally he said, "Where's your husband?" "Dead. 3 years now. Turned out the wealthy rancher was also a violent drunk. I suppose I didn't escape father after all." Something shifted in James's expression. "Did he hurt you?" "For 20 years. But that's not your burden to carry. You're still my sister." "Am I?" James looked at Clara, who squeezed his hand encouragingly. "One dinner," he said finally. "We'll have dinner. After that we'll see." Margaret's composed mask finally cracked completely, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you both." Dinner was awkward at first, full of false starts and painful silences. But gradually, as they talked about safer topics, the store, the town, the coming baby, the ice began to thaw. Margaret told stories of their mother whom James barely remembered. James told her about the years after she left, carefully edited, but honest enough. "I looked for you once," he admitted. "After I left Reeves, I tried to find you. Thought maybe we could start over." "What stopped you?" "I found out you'd married well. You had a respectable life. I didn't want to taint it with what I'd become." "Oh, James." Margaret reached across the table, and after a hesitation he took her hand. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both so concerned with protecting the other that we lost 15 years. "Maybe they weren't lost," Clara interjected. "Maybe they were necessary for you both to become who you are, now ready to try again." Margaret stayed for a week, helping in the store, getting to know the town that had embraced her brother. When she left, it was with promises to return for the baby's birth and letters to fill the gap between. "She seems nice," Clara said that night as they prepared for bed. "She abandoned me," James said, but there was less heat in it now. "She was 16 and scared. You've done worse things for worse reasons and forgiven yourself." "Have I?" Clara turned to face him fully. "Haven't you?" "I'm trying. Every day I'm trying." He pulled her close, mindful of her belly between them. You make it easier to believe I'm worth forgiving. You are. You always were. October arrived with golden aspens and the first hints of snow on the distant peaks. Clara was enormous, uncomfortable, and increasingly impatient. "This child is never coming out," she declared on October 15th, glaring at her swollen ankles. "Dr. Morrison said any day now," James soothed, though he looked as anxious as she felt. "Dr. Morrison is a man. What does he know about—" She stopped, gasping as a sharp pain radiated through her middle. "Clara, I think it's starting." What followed was 18 hours that felt like 18 years. James paced the bedroom like a caged mountain cat while Dr. Morrison and Mrs. Patterson attended to Clara. Her cries echoed through the store, and James had to be physically restrained from bursting in several times. "Let the women work," Sheriff Watson said, holding him back. "Clara's strong. She'll be fine." "You don't know that." "No, but I know she'll kill you herself if you burst in there and distract the doctor." Finally, as dawn broke on October 16th, a different cry filled the air, high, angry, and absolutely beautiful. "It's a boy!" Mrs. Patterson called out. "A healthy baby boy!" James was through the door before anyone could stop him, falling to his knees beside the bed, where Clara lay exhausted but radiant, a small bundle in her arms. "Meet your son," she whispered. James took the baby with shaking hands, staring down at the tiny face with its shock of dark hair and unfocused blue eyes. "He's perfect," James breathed. "Clara, he's absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" They'd discussed names for months but hadn't settled on anything. Now looking at his son, James said, "Samuel, for your cousin who brought me to you. Samuel David for your father." "Samuel David Mallory." Clara agreed, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect." The town celebrated the birth as if Samuel were everyone's child. Gifts poured in hand-carved toys, quilts enough preserves to last through winter, twice over. Even the roughest cowboys who passed through seemed softened by the sight of James Mallory, notorious gunslinger, carefully cradling his infant son while running the store. But parenthood brought new fears alongside the joy. James became even more vigilant, if that were possible. He installed new locks, reinforced the windows, and Clara caught him standing over Samuel's cradle at night just watching. "He's not going anywhere," she said softly, one night in November, finding him there again. "I keep thinking I'll wake up, and it'll all be a dream. You him this life. That I'll be back on the trail alone with nothing but my guns and my reputation." "It's real," Clara assured him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "We're real. I don't deserve this much happiness." "Yes, you do. You earned it, James. Every day you choose to be better, you earn it." Winter came early and harsh that year, blanketing Redstone in snow that made travel difficult. It was during one particularly severe storm in December that trouble found them again. Clara was nursing Samuel in the back room while James handled the few customers who'd braved the weather when she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. Well, James Mallory, shopkeeper. If the boys could see you now." She recognized that voice, Cole Younger, one of Reeves's former lieutenants who'd escaped the shootout. Moving carefully, she placed Samuel in his cradle and reached for the rifle they kept loaded by the door. But before she could move further, she heard James speak, his voice calm, but with that dangerous edge she remembered from the showdown with Reeves. "Cole, thought you were smart enough to stay gone." "I was. But then I heard about your perfect little life here. Wife, baby, respectable business. Seemed wrong that you got all that while Tom's dead in the ground." "Tom made his choice. So did you. And choices have consequences." Clara heard the distinctive click of a hammer being cocked. Without thinking, she burst through the door, rifle raised. "Drop it," she commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Cole laughed. "The shopkeeper's wife thinks she's tough. How precious." "The shopkeeper's wife has killed 3 men," Clara said coldly. "You'll be the 4th if you don't drop that gun." "Clara, get back to it," James said, not taking his eyes off Cole. "No. This is our store, our home. He doesn't get to come in here and threaten our family." "Family, chum," Cole sneered. "You really have gone soft, Mallory." "Or maybe I finally got strong enough to be something more than a killer," James replied. The standoff stretched taut, the only sound the howling wind outside. Then Samuel cried from the back room, high and demanding, and Cole made the mistake of glancing toward the sound. James moved faster, then thought his gun clearing leather and firing in one smooth motion. Cole's weapon flew from his hand as he clutched his bleeding wrist. "The next one goes in your head," James said conversationally, "unless you walk out that door and never come back." "This isn't over," Cole snarled. "Yes, it is," Clara said, her rifle still trained on him. "Because if you come back, if you even think about threatening our family again, you won't face James, you'll face me. And unlike my husband, I don't have a reputation to uphold or old friendships to honor. I'm just a mother protecting her child, and there's nothing more dangerous than that." Something in her voice must have convinced him, because Cole backed toward the door, cradling his injured hand. "You've changed Mallory. That woman's made you weak." "No," James said softly. "She's made me worth something. There's a difference." After Cole left, Clara finally lowered the rifle, her hands beginning to shake. James caught her as her knees buckled, holding her tight against him. "You magnificent, terrifying woman," he murmured into her hair. "Is he gone?" "For now. But Clara, there might be others. There will always be others. Then we'll face them. Together. That's what family does." From the back room, Samuel's cries grew more insistent. Clara pulled away with a watery laugh. Someone's impatient for his dinner. As she went to tend to their son, James watched her go with an expression of such love and pride that old Mrs. Patterson, who'd been hiding behind a barrel of flour the whole time, had to wipe her eyes. "You got yourself a warrior there, Mr. Mallory," she said. "I got myself everything," James replied softly. That night, after Samuel was asleep and the store was locked tight, James and Clara lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside. "Were you really going to shoot him?" James asked. "If he'd threatened you or Samuel without hesitation." "You've never killed anyone, Clara. It changes you." "I know. I've seen how it's changed you, but some things are worth that change. You are. Samuel is." James was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think violence was the only thing I was good at, the only thing that defined me. And now I know I'm good at other things too, being a husband, being a father, being part of this town." He turned to face her in the darkness. "But the violence is still there, still part of me. Today proved that. Today proved you can control it. Use it only when necessary. That's not weakness, James. That's strength. How did you become so wise?" "I married a complicated man. It required some thinking." He laughed softly, pulling her closer. "I love you, Clara Mallory. And I love you, James Mallory. All of you, even the parts that scare you." As winter deepened and Christmas approached, life settled back into routine. Samuel grew with astonishing speed, his eyes settling into the same whiskey color as his father's, his temperament proving to be an interesting mix of his parents'. James's watchfulness combined with Clara's determination. The store prospered, becoming not just a place of business, but a gathering spot for the town. James started a chess club that met Tuesday evenings, teaching strategy to anyone interested. Clara organized a lending library in one corner, her collection of books growing as travelers donated volumes in exchange for supplies. Margaret returned as promised for Christmas, bringing expensive gifts and a tentative hope for reconciliation. She and James were still careful with each other, years of hurt not easily overcome, but Samuel seemed to bridge the gap. Watching James's stern sister melt at the baby's gurgling laugh was a Christmas miracle in itself. "He looks like you did as a baby," Margaret said one evening, cradling Samuel while James and Clara decorated a small tree in the store. "You remember that?" James asked, surprised. "I remember everything about you before I left. How you used to follow me everywhere, determined to do whatever I was doing. How you'd bring me wildflowers you'd picked even though Father would whip you for wasting time." Her voice grew thick. "How you cried when I told you I was leaving." "Maggie." It was the first time Clara had heard him use the nickname, and Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Jamie, for all of it." "I know." James crossed to his sister, pulling her and Samuel into an embrace. "We can't change the past, but maybe we can do better with the future." Christmas Eve brought the whole town to the store for a celebration that had become tradition. There was singing and dancing gifts for the children and Mrs. Chen's special dumplings that had become as much a part of Redstone Christmas as snow. Sheriff Watson stood to make a toast, raising his glass of whiskey. To the Mallory family who showed us that a town's strength isn't in its guns, but in its people standing together. To James, who proved a man can change. To Clara, who proved a woman can do anything she sets her mind to. And to young Samuel, who represents all our hopes for the future. "Hear, hear," the crowd cheered, and Clara felt her eyes burn with happy tears. Later, as the celebration continued around them, she and James stole a moment alone on the back porch, Samuel sleeping peacefully in James's arms. "Happy?" James asked. "Completely. Even though you married a gunslinger." "I married a good man who happened to be a gunslinger. There's a difference." "Is there Clara took Samuel from him, settling the baby against her shoulder, then reached up to touch James's scarred cheek. "The gunslinger was your past. The man you are now, the father, the husband, the shopkeeper, that's your truth." "Our truth," he corrected, covering her hand with his. "Our truth?" she agreed. Inside, someone started playing a fiddle, the melody of Silent Night drifting out to them. Snow began to fall soft and silent, blanketing the world in pristine white. "Next year Samuel will be walking," Clara mused, "getting into everything in the store." "I'll build gates for the dangerous sections," James immediately said, already planning. "And we'll need to move the ammunition to a locked room he can't access." "Always protecting," Clara said fondly. "Always. You and Samuel, the store, this town, everything I love. And yourself." "I'm learning to include myself in that category. You're teaching me." "We're teaching each other," Clara corrected. The new year of 1878 arrived with a blizzard that trapped Redstone in a cocoon of white for nearly 2 weeks. It was during this enforced isolation that Clara discovered she was pregnant again, the familiar morning sickness announcing itself as she tried to prepare breakfast while the wind howled outside their windows. James found her bent over the wash basin, Samuel playing with wooden blocks at her feet. "Clara." It seems Samuel is going to have a brother or sister, she managed between waves of nausea. The joy on James's face was immediate and complete, though it was quickly tempered with concern. "So soon, Samuel's barely 15 months old." "Children come when they will not when we plan them," Clara said, straightening carefully. "Though I admit the timing could be better." "We'll manage, we always do." James scooped up Samuel, who immediately grabbed for his father's nose with chubby fingers. "You hear that, little man? You're going to be a big brother." Samuel babbled something incomprehensible but enthusiastic, making them both laugh. The winter's isolation proved to be a blessing in disguise. With travel impossible and the store essentially closed, James threw himself into preparations with an intensity that both amused and touched Clara. He reinforced the stairs to their living quarters, added railings where there had been none, and built an ingenious pulley system so Clara wouldn't have to carry heavy items up and down. "You're going to wrap me in cotton wool, aren't you?" Clara asked one evening, finding him installing yet another lamp to brighten the store's darker corners. "Light helps prevent falls," he said defensively. "James Mallory, the most feared gunslinger in 3 territories, is baby-proofing. James Mallory, the shopkeeper and father, is taking care of his family," he corrected, pulling her close. "There's a difference." By the time the snow cleared enough for regular business to resume, word of Clara's pregnancy had somehow already spread through town. Mrs. Patterson claimed it was the particular glow about her, though Clara suspected it had more to do with James buying every piece of safety equipment the traveling merchants brought through. Spring arrived with more than just wildflowers and warming temperatures. It brought a letter that would change everything. James was sorting mail when he stopped staring at an official-looking envelope bearing the seal of the Colorado Territory. "What is it?" Clara asked, noting his sudden stillness. He opened it slowly, read it twice, then handed it to her with expression she couldn't decipher. The letter was from the territorial governor offering James the position of U.S. Marshal for the district. "Marshal," Clara breathed. "James, this is extraordinary." "It's a mistake," he said flatly. "It's not a mistake. Look, Sheriff Watson recommended you. So did Judge Harper from Denver, and she scanned the letter, the mayor and entire town council of Redstone. They want the gunslinger, not the shopkeeper. They want the man who protected this town, who understands both sides of the law. Clara set the letter down carefully. What do you want? James was quiet for a long moment, watching Samuel toddle between shelves, occasionally stopping to examine something before his father or mother redirected him from anything breakable. I want our children to grow up safe, he said finally. I want them to be proud of their father, not ashamed of what he was. They could be proud of a father who's a U.S. Marshal. Or they could be orphans if someone faster comes along. Clara moved to him, taking his hands. You're not just fast, James. You're smart, experienced, and you understand criminals because you've been on that side. You could do real good as a marshal. I do good here. We do good here with the store, with the town. We do. But maybe we could do more. Before James could respond, the bell chimed and Margaret entered, having extended her visit through the winter. She took one look at their faces and asked, "What's happened?" James showed her the letter. Margaret read it, then looked at her brother with something close to awe. A U.S. Marshal. Mother would have been so proud. Mother would have been horrified that her son was a gunslinger at all. No, Margaret said firmly. Mother believed in redemption and second chances. She would have seen this as God's plan, taking your past and turning it into something that could protect others. Since when did you become religious? Since I watched my brother transform from an outlaw into a pillar of the community. If that's not divine intervention, I don't know what is. The debate continued for days, with the whole town weighing in. Some, like Mr. Garrett, worried that James taking the marshal position would bring more danger to Redstone. Others, like Sheriff Watson, argued that having a U.S. Marshal based in their town would make them the safest place in the territory. It was Clara who finally ended the debate in her typically direct fashion. She found James sitting in the store after closing the letter on the counter before him, his old marshal's badge from years past beside it. Something she hadn't even known he'd kept. "You've already decided," she said. He looked up, startled. "What? You kept your old badge. You've been practicing your quick draw again. I've seen you in the barn at dawn. You've been reading law books from Judge Harper. You've already decided to take it." "I haven't." "You have. You're just afraid to admit it because you think it means choosing your old life over our new one." James's shoulders slumped. "Doesn't it?" "No." Clara sat beside him, taking his hand. "It means choosing to use everything you are past and present to build our future. The store won't disappear. I can run it with Margaret's help. You can be based here, only traveling when necessary. And if someone comes for the marshal, if they threaten you and the children to get to me, then they'll face what Cole Younger faced, a mother protecting her family. James, we can't live in fear of what might happen. We have to live for what we can make happen." "When did you become so philosophical?" "When I married a complicated man who thinks too much." James pulled her onto his lap, mindful of her growing belly. "You really think I should do this?" "I think you should follow your instincts." "What do they tell you?" "That I could help people, that I could make a difference." "Then there's your answer." James kissed her deeply, then rested his forehead against hers. "How did I get lucky enough to find you?" "You walked into my store looking for soap, remember, Quit? Best purchase I ever made." The ceremony to swear James in as marshal took place on a brilliant May morning with what seemed like half the territory in attendance. Clara stood beside him, Samuel on her hip, and very obviously pregnant with their second child as Judge Harper administered the oath. "Do you, James Mallory, swear to uphold the laws of the United States of America and the Colorado Territory to protect the innocent and pursue the guilty without favor or prejudice, so help you God?" "I do," James said, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. As Judge Harper pinned the star to James's vest, applause erupted, but Clara saw the weight of it settle on her husband's shoulders, saw him straighten under it rather than bend. "Marshal Mallory," Judge Harper said formally, then smiled. "You've come a long way from the angry young man I once tried to prosecute. You remember that I remember thinking you had potential if someone could just redirect all that anger into something constructive. Seems Mrs. Mallory here managed what the entire legal system couldn't. She has a gift. James agreed, catching Clara's eye with a soft smile. The first test of his new position came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after his appointment, word came that the garrison gang had robbed a bank in Sterling, killing 2 guards in the process. They were headed south, likely to cross into New Mexico territory. James was loading his saddlebags when Clara found him in the barn at dawn. How long to? A week, maybe 2. Depends on how cold the trail is. You'll be careful. It wasn't a question, but he answered anyway. Always. I have too much to come home to now. Clara kissed him goodbye at the store's entrance, aware of the town watching of the weight of being the marshal's wife, now added to her other roles. Bring them to justice, she said quietly, but more importantly, come home. Yes, ma'am. The 2 weeks James was gone felt like 2 months. Clara threw herself into the store work, grateful for Margaret's steady presence and help with Samuel. Her sister-in-law had proven surprisingly adept at managing inventory, and even better at handling difficult customers with a combination of charm and steel that reminded Clara of James. You're worried, Margaret observed one evening after closing, finding Clara staring out the window at the empty street. He's been gone 12 days. He said it might be 2 weeks. I know, but I can't shake this feeling. Clara pressed a hand to her swollen belly. The baby's been restless all day. As if in response to his mother's concern, Samuel toddled over and raised his arms. Mama up. Clara lifted him, finding comfort in his solid weight, his absolute trust that his parents would always be there. Papa will come home, she told him, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring him or herself. Papa, Samuel agreed enthusiastically, then pointed out the window. Papa horse. Clara's heart leaped, but the street remained empty. Not yet, sweet boy. Soon. But Samuel continued pointing, growing agitated. Papa horse, Papa hurt. A chill ran down Clara's spine. Samuel had never said hurt before, didn't even know what it meant as far as she knew. She was about to dismiss it as coincidence when she heard it, the distant sound of hoofbeats, irregular and too slow for a healthy horse. She thrust Samuel at Margaret and grabbed the rifle, rushing outside. In the dying light, she could make out a rider slumped in the saddle, the horse moving with the careful gait of an animal carrying precious cargo. James. She ran toward him, Margaret following with Samuel. He raised his head at her voice, and she saw blood on his shirt, his face pale beneath trail dust. Clara, made it home. She reached him just as he started to slide from the saddle, managing to break his fall, though the impact sent pain shooting through her back. Margaret, get Dr. Morrison. Now. The next hours were a blur of fear and frantic activity. James had been shot twice, once in the shoulder, once in the side. He'd ridden 2 days with the wounds barely tended, driven by determination to get home. The gang, Sheriff Watson asked while Dr. Morrison worked. Got them, James managed through gritted teeth. All 5, 3 dead, 2 for trial. At what cost? Clara demanded, holding his hand while the doctor extracted the first bullet. Worth it, James gasped. They killed a family. Children. Couldn't let them get away. Clara's anger dissolved into understanding. Of course he'd pushed himself past endurance to catch men who'd killed children. It was the same trigger that had made him turn on Reeves all those years ago. Dr. Morrison worked through the night, and by dawn, James's fever had broken. Clara had refused to leave his side despite her advanced pregnancy and Margaret's attempts to make her rest. You need to think of the baby, Margaret urged. I am thinking of the baby. The baby needs its father. James woke properly near noon, his eyes focusing on Clara's face with visible relief. You're here. Where else would I be? Told you I'd come home. Nearly dead doesn't count as keeping your promise, she said, trying for stern but achieving something closer to tearful relief. Not nearly dead, just damaged. He tried to sit up, winced, and let her push him back down. Where's Samuel? With Margaret. He knew you were coming somehow, kept saying Papa horse and Papa hurt before you appeared. James's eyebrows rose. He knew. Children sometimes know things, or maybe he just inherited his father's instincts. Or his mother's, James countered. He studied her face, seeing the exhaustion, the strain. You need to rest. I need you to stop getting shot. I'll work on that. Recovery was slow and complicated by the fact that James was a terrible patient. Within 3 days, he was trying to get out of bed. Within a week, he was insisting he could work in the store, and by the second week, Clara was ready to tie him to the bed just to keep him still. "You're going to tear your stitches," she warned, finding him trying to lift a crate. "I'm going to go insane if I have to stay in bed one more day." Better insane than dead. Their argument was interrupted by Samuel toddling in, dragging James's gun belt behind him. "Papa," he announced proudly, offering his prize. Both parents froze. The guns weren't loaded. James was religious about keeping ammunition separate when not wearing them, but the sight of their toddler with the weapons sent ice through Clara's veins. James knelt carefully, wincing at the pull on his wounds. "Thank you, Samuel, but these aren't toys. These are tools and dangerous ones." Samuel's face crumpled at the serious tone. "Papa's sad." "No, son, Papa's not sad, but these—" James took the gun belt gently. "These need to stay where Papa puts them. Can you promise?" Samuel nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Play blocks." "Yes, we can play blocks." That evening after Samuel was asleep, Clara found James standing at their window, staring out at the town with an expression she couldn't read. "What are you thinking? About choices? About what we pass on to our children?" He turned to her. "I don't want Samuel growing up thinking violence is the answer, but I also want him able to protect himself, his family. He'll learn both, protection and restraint, justice and mercy. He'll learn from watching you. That's what worries me." Clara moved to him, taking his hands. "James, you're a good man. You're a good father. Samuel and this new baby are lucky to have you. Even if having me puts them in danger, life is dangerous. Having a father who understands that who's prepared for it but doesn't live in fear of it, that makes them safer, not less." James pulled her close, his hand spreading over her belly, where their second child grew. "How do you always know what to say?" "Practice. You're a complicated man, remember. Requires a lot of right words." June brought unexpected prosperity to Redstone as the railroad announced plans to extend a spur line to the town. Property values soared, new businesses opened, and the Mallory and Monroe Mercantile found itself at the center of a boom. "We need to expand," Clara announced one evening, showing James the ledgers. "We're turning away business because we don't have space or stock." "We could buy the building next door," James suggested. "Old Pete's been talking about retiring, moving to Denver to be with his daughter. Can we afford it? With what the marshal's salary adds to the store profits?" "Yes. But Clara, are you sure you want to take on more when the baby's due soon?" "The baby's not due until August, and we'll have help. Margaret's staying permanently, did she tell you? She's buying the widow Harrison's house." James smiled. "She mentioned it, said she'd wasted enough years away from family. Plus, I think she's sweet on Sheriff Watson." "Billy? He's 10 years younger than her." 8 years, and he looks at her like she hung the moon." "How did I miss this?" "You've been a little busy getting shot and recovering," Clara said dryly. The expansion of the store proceeded through the early summer with James overseeing construction while technically still recovering. Clara managed the daily business with Margaret's help, Samuel toddling between them, helping by moving items from shelf to shelf with great seriousness. It was during this busy time that another ghost from James's past appeared. Clara was negotiating with a supplier when a woman entered the store, young pretty in a hard way, with clothes that suggested a profession Clara politely didn't name. "I'm looking for James Mallory," the woman said. "He's in the back. Can I help you?" The woman studied Clara, taking in her obvious pregnancy, the wedding ring, the proprietary way she stood in the store. "You're his wife." "I am. I'm Lila. I knew James before." Clara felt no jealousy, only curiosity and a touch of wariness. "And you're here because I need help, my employer. He doesn't like when girls leave, but I want to start clean somewhere else. I heard James was a marshal now, thought maybe he'd help you." "He's helped before. Not me specifically, but girls like me. When he was with Reeves, he'd make sure we got away safe if things went bad." This was news to Clara, another piece of the complex puzzle that was her husband's past. "Wait here." She found James checking the new shelving Samuel perched on his shoulders. "There's a woman here to see you. Lila." James went still, then carefully lifted Samuel down. "Take him to Margaret." "James, it's not what you're thinking, but it's complicated." Clara took Samuel but said firmly, "We'll talk about this." She tried not to eavesdrop, truly she did, but the store's acoustics made it impossible not to hear some of the conversation. Lila was in trouble, that much was clear. Her employer, a saloon owner in Denver, was violent, controlling, and had threatened to kill her if she tried to leave. "I can arrest him," James was saying. "On what grounds? My word against his. You know how that goes." "Then I'll have a word with him." "James," Lila's voice was resigned, "you can't threaten every bad man in the territory. Watch me." In the end, James arranged for Lila to travel to San Francisco, where Margaret had connections from her late husband's business dealings. He gave her traveling money from his own pocket and a letter of introduction to a respectable boarding house. "Why?" Clara asked that night after Lila had gone. "Because everyone deserves a second chance, and because—" James hesitated. "My mother, before she died, she had to do things to keep us fed after Father drank away his pay. Nothing like Lila's situation, but close enough. I swore if I ever had the power to help women in that position, I would." Clara kissed him softly. "You're a good man, James Mallory." "I'm trying to be." "No, you are. The trying is just what good men do." July brought sweltering heat and Clara's increasing discomfort as her pregnancy progressed. She was bigger this time, moved slower, tired, faster. James hovered constantly when he wasn't away on marshal business, which thankfully had been quiet since the Garrison gang. "Stop fussing," she told him for the 100th time, finding him rearranging the store's layout yet again to make paths wider for her. "You nearly fell yesterday." "I tripped on Samuel's toy. That could happen pregnant or not." "But you are pregnant, very pregnant." "Yes, thank you, I had noticed." She softened at his worried expression. "James' women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my woman, not my babies." The second week of July brought a surprise visitor, Judge Harper, but not on official business. He came with his wife, a formidable woman named Constance, who took one look at Clara and announced she was staying until after the birth. "You need proper help," she declared. "Men are useless at these things." "I object to that," Judge Harper said mildly. "You fainted when our youngest was born, dear. That was 30 years ago. And you'd faint again today given the chance." Clara liked her immediately. With Constance Harper taking charge of the domestic arrangements, Clara could focus on the store's expansion, which was nearly complete. The new space would triple their capacity, allowing them to add new product lines and even a small cafe area where travelers could rest. "It's ambitious," Margaret said, reviewing the plans. "It's necessary," Clara countered. "The town's growing. We need to grow with it. And if the railroad changes its mind, if the boom goes bust, then we adapt. We survive. It's what we do." James returned from a short trip to Denver at the end of July, bringing news that would change everything once again. He found Clara in the new section of the store, directing workers on where to place shelving despite being so pregnant she could barely see her feet. "You're supposed to be resting," he said. "I'll rest when I'm dead." "Don't say that." The sharpness in his voice made her turn. He looked exhausted, older somehow than when he'd left 3 days ago. "What happened?" "There's a new gang forming, led by someone calling himself the Ghost." "Creative name," Clara said dryly. "He claims to be Tom Reeves's brother." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. "Reeves didn't have a brother." "Half-brother, apparently. Younger meaner, if reports are true. And he's sworn vengeance on me." "Of course he has." Clara sank into a chair, one hand on her belly. "When will it end, James? When will we stop paying for your past?" "I don't know." James knelt before her, taking her hands. "I can resign. We can leave, go somewhere he won't find us. Run. That's your solution. To protect you and the children." "Yes." Clara was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, "No. No. No, we don't run. This is our home, our children's home. We stand and fight like we always have. Clara, this isn't like before. You're about to have a baby. We have Samuel to think about. I am thinking about them. What lesson does it teach if we run every time someone threatens us? That fear wins, that bullies get their way. It teaches them to survive. Surviving isn't living, James. You taught me that. Before he could respond, Clara gasped, pressing a hand to her belly. Oh, what is it time? I think, yes, the baby's coming. What followed was controlled chaos. Constance Harper took charge, banishing James and Judge Harper to the store, while Margaret and Dr. Morrison tended to Clara. This labor was faster than Samuel's, but no less intense. James paced the store like a caged animal, Samuel toddling after him, mimicking his father's worried expression. Papa said, Samuel asked. Papa's worried, James corrected, scooping his son up. About Mama and the new baby. Samuel considered this seriously, then patted James's cheek with a chubby hand. Mama's strong. Yes, James agreed, emotion thick in his voice. Mama's very strong. As if to prove Samuel right, a new cry pierced the air just as the sun was setting, strong, healthy, and definitely announcing its arrival to the world. Margaret appeared beaming. It's a girl, a beautiful, perfect girl. James was moving before she finished speaking, taking the stairs 3 at a time despite Samuel's weight in his arms. He found Clara propped up in bed, exhausted, but radiant, a tiny bundle in her arms. Meet your daughter, she said softly. The baby was smaller than Samuel had been, with a shock of reddish hair that suggested she'd inherited Clara's coloring. Her eyes, when she opened them briefly, were the deep blue of all newborns, but James thought he saw Clara's determination in them already. She's beautiful, he breathed. What should we name her? Sarah, Clara said immediately. Sarah Grace. For your mother and mine. Sarah Grace Mallory. James tested the name, then smiled. It's perfect. She's perfect. Samuel, not to be left out, reached for his sister. Baby, gentle, Clara cautioned, helping him touch Sarah's tiny hand. The baby's fingers immediately curled around Samuel's, and his eyes went wide with wonder. Mine, he asked hopefully. She's your sister, James explained. You're her big brother. You'll protect her, help her. Samuel nodded solemnly, then leaned down to kiss Sarah's forehead with surprising gentleness. Mine, he declared again, this time with certainty. That night, with both children asleep and the store quiet below, James and Clara lay together in the darkness, Sarah in a cradle beside their bed. Samuel in his small bed across the room. A daughter, James said wonderingly. I have a daughter. Scared? Terrified. Boys I understand at least a little, but girls, how do I raise a girl? The same way you raise a boy. With love, patience, and probably a lot of mistakes. I don't want to make mistakes with her, with either of them. You will. We both will. But we'll do our best, and that's all anyone can do. James was quiet for a moment. About the ghost. Tomorrow. Clara interrupted. Tomorrow we'll worry about ghosts and gangs and all the rest. Tonight let's just be grateful for what we have. A successful business, 2 healthy children, and the most amazing wife in the territory. Don't forget the brother-in-law, who's probably going to be the actual brother-in-law soon. James groaned. Billy and Margaret, I still can't believe it. Love finds a way, Clara said softly. Even in the most unexpected places. Like a mercantile in Redstone. Exactly like that. Sarah stirred, making the soft, snuffling sounds that preceded crying. Clara started to rise, but James was already up, lifting the baby with practiced ease. I've got her. You rest. Clara watched him pace the room, whispering to Sarah about the store, the town, all the things he'd teach her when she was older. It was a side of James. Few people saw the gentle father, the devoted husband, the man who'd found redemption not through violence or fame, but through the simple act of choosing love over fear, hope over cynicism. James, she called softly. He turned Sarah, now quiet, in his arms. Yes. Whatever comes, the ghost, other threats, whatever, we'll face it together. Together, he agreed. And in that moment, with their children safe and their love strong, Clara believed they could face anything. The next morning brought news that the ghost and his gang had robbed a bank in Pueblo, leaving 3 dead. They were heading north toward Redstone. James stood in the store, star gleaming on his chest, checking his weapons with the methodical care of a man preparing for war. But this time was different. This time he wasn't alone. Sheriff Watson was there along with 5 deputies. Judge Harper had sent for additional marshals from Denver. Even old Pete, supposedly retired, had shown up with his ancient but well-maintained rifle. "You don't have to do this," James told them. "Like hell we don't," Pete replied. "You're one of us now, Marshal. We protect our own." Clara appeared in the doorway, Sarah in her arms, Samuel holding her skirt. She'd argued about being part of the defense, but James had finally convinced her that the children needed her more. "You come back," she said simply. "Both of you," she added to Sheriff Watson, who blushed and glanced toward where Margaret stood. "Yes, ma'am," both men said in unison. As the defenders rode out to meet the threat before it could reach the town, Clara stood with the other women and children watching from the store's expanded windows. Sarah slept peacefully, unaware of the danger, but Samuel pressed against his mother's leg, somehow understanding the gravity of the moment. "Papa come back?" he asked. Clara lifted him with her free arm, holding both her children close. "Yes, sweet boy. Papa always comes back." And as the dust cloud of riders disappeared into the distance, she prayed she was right. Because this time, it wasn't just James who needed to come home. It was the father of her children, the partner in her business, the man who'd walked into her store looking for soap and stayed to build a life. The sun climbed higher and Clara returned to the store. There was work to do, customers to serve, a business to run. But every few minutes her eyes went to the window, watching for the dust cloud that would signal the rider's return. Margaret joined her, equally anxious. "They'll be fine," she said, though it sounded more like a question than a statement. "They'll be fine," Clara agreed, making it a declaration through sheer force of will. The hours stretched like pulled taffy as Clara tried to maintain normalcy in the store. Customers came and went, many of them anxious townspeople seeking news that she couldn't provide. Sarah fussed in her cradle behind the counter, and Samuel had grown increasingly clingy, refusing to leave his mother's side, even to play with his beloved blocks. It was near sunset when young Timothy Chen burst through the door, gasping for breath. "They're coming back. I saw them from the water tower." Clara's heart leaped, but Timothy's expression wasn't entirely relieved. "How many?" she asked carefully. "Can't tell for sure, ma'am. There's dust and some of the horses are carrying double." Double meant wounded, or worse. Clara handed Sarah to Margaret and grabbed the medical supplies they'd prepared. "Timothy, run to Dr. Morrison. Tell him to be ready. Margaret, keep the children here." She was on the street when the riders came into view, and her knees nearly buckled with relief when she saw James upright in his saddle. But that relief was short-lived as she took in the full scene. Sheriff Watson was slumped against James' blood soaking through a makeshift bandage on his shoulder. 2 other deputies were wounded, and old Pete's horse carried a body draped across it. "Inside quickly." Dr. Morrison appeared, taking charge. "The worst injured to my office. Mrs. Mallory, I'll need your help." Clara met James's eyes, briefly saw he was unhurt, and nodded. There would be time for reunions later. Now there was work to do. The next hours were a blur of blood and bandages, cries of pain, and whispered prayers. Sheriff Watson's wound was serious, but not fatal, the bullet having passed clean through. Deputy Collins had taken a graze to the temple that bled spectacularly, but wasn't deep. The body on Pete's horse was one of the ghost's men, not one of theirs, which was a mercy. It was near midnight when James finally told the full story. The ghost gang had been larger than expected, 15 men to their 8, but they'd had the advantage of surprise and position, catching the outlaws in a box canyon where their numbers meant less. "The ghost himself?" Clara asked, though she could guess from James's expression. "Got away, him and 5 others. We captured 4, killed the rest. He'll be back." "Yes." James's voice was flat with exhaustion. "He'll be back and he'll be angry." Then we'll be ready. Clara, you just had a baby 2 days ago. You should be in bed, not what? Not helping save lives. Not standing beside my husband. She softened at his worried expression. James, I'm fine. Tired, sore, but fine. And I'll be a lot less fine if I'm sitting uselessly while others fight our battles. Before he could argue further, Margaret appeared in the doorway. James Sheriff Watson is asking for you. And me. She blushed slightly. They found Billy Watson propped up in one of Dr. Morrison's beds, pale but alert. He looked between the siblings, then focused on James. If I don't make it, you'll make it, Dr. Morrison interrupted. The wound's clean, no vital organs hit. You'll be sore for weeks, but otherwise fine. Still, Billy persisted. I need to say this. James, I want to marry your sister. Margaret gasped softly. James's expression didn't change. You're asking my permission. I'm telling you my intentions. I'd prefer your blessing, but I'll marry her either way if she'll have me. Billy Watson, Margaret exclaimed. This is hardly the time or place. It's exactly the time, Billy interrupted. Today proved that tomorrow isn't guaranteed. I love you, Margaret. I have since you arrived. You're too good for me. You're older than me. You're sophisticated, where I'm simple, but I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making you happy. Margaret was crying now, her usual composure completely shattered. You foolish, wonderful man. Yes, 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 I'll marry you. Age difference and sophistication be damned. James cleared his throat. Do I get a say in this? Both turned to him anxiously. He let them squirm for a moment, then smiled. Welcome to the family, Billy, though I should warn you the Mallory women are a handful. Hey, Clara and Margaret protested in unison, making everyone laugh. The moment of joy was brief, overshadowed by the knowledge that the ghost was still out there. James spent the next days organizing the town's defenses, turning Redstone into a fortress. Every able-bodied person was armed and trained. Watch schedules were established. Escape routes for women and children were planned. It was during this tense time that an unexpected ally arrived. Clara was nursing Sarah in the back room when she heard a familiar voice in the store. I'm looking for Marshall Mallory. She knew that voice, though she couldn't immediately place it. Carefully settling Sarah in her cradle, she moved to where she could see into the store. A man stood at the counter, weathered and scarred, wearing the rough clothes of a career cowboy. It took her a moment to recognize him, Jake Morrison's brother, the one who'd confronted James months ago. Mr. Morrison, she said, stepping out. He touched his hat. Ma'am, is the marshal around? He's at the jail. Is there trouble? No, ma'am, least not from me. I'm here to help, actually. Clara studied him. Why? Because the ghost tried to recruit me. Figured the enemy of my enemy and all that. But when I heard what he planned, Morrison shook his head. I got no quarrel with you folks. And what he's planning ain't justice, it's slaughter. Clara's blood ran cold. What's he planning? Attack during the Founders' Day celebration next week, when everyone's gathered distracted. He's got 20 men now, maybe more. 20? Clara felt sick. Even with the whole town armed, 20 hardened outlaws would be devastating. Morrison must have seen her fear because he added quickly, but I know where they're camped, and I know the ghost's weakness. Which is, he's not his brother. Tom Reeves was smart, careful. The ghost is all rage and impulse. He can be baited. When James returned and heard Morrison's information, his expression was grim. You're offering to help us. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, Morrison said bluntly. But you don't have many options. And like I said, what the ghost is planning ain't right. My brother was a lot of things, but he wouldn't have stood for killing women and children. Your brother tried to kill an unarmed man. And you stopped him. That was justice. What the ghost wants is massacre. James was quiet for a long moment, then extended his hand. All right, Morrison. But if you betray us, I won't. Morrison shook his hand firmly. I owe you that much for not killing me when I confronted you. The plan they developed was risky but necessary. They wouldn't wait for the ghost to attack during Founders' Day. Instead, they'd stage a trap using the celebration as bait while actually being prepared for war. It's dangerous, Judge Harper said when presented with the plan. Using our own people as bait. Everyone will be armed, James explained. And we'll have sharpshooters positioned on every roof. The celebration will look normal, but it'll be a fortress. And if something goes wrong, if innocent people get hurt, innocent people will get hurt if we do nothing, Clara interjected. She'd insisted on being part of the planning despite having given birth only a week ago. At least this way we control the battlefield. Constance Harper studied Clara with something like admiration. You're not what I expected when we first met, Mrs. Mallory. Life has a way of changing us, Mrs. Harper. Indeed it does. The days leading to Founders' Day were tense with preparation. Every detail was planned and replanned. Weapons were hidden throughout the town square. Escape routes were cleared and marked. The women who couldn't fight were drilling on emergency medical procedures. Margaret and Billy Watson decided to marry the day before Founders' Day, reasoning that if something went wrong, they wanted at least one day as husband and wife. It was a simple ceremony in the church with just family and close friends. But Clara thought she'd never seen two people happier. Any regrets? Clara asked Margaret as they prepared for the reception at the store. Only that I waited so long to come back to James, to family. Margaret touched Clara's hand. Thank you. For what? For loving my brother when he couldn't love himself. For giving him the family that I failed to provide. We're all family now, Clara said firmly. That's what matters. The morning of Founders' Day dawned clear and hot. Clara stood in their bedroom, checking the derringer in her pocket, the knife in her boot, the small pistol hidden in Sarah's pram. She'd stationed herself as one of the innocent mothers in the square, but she'd be armed and ready. James caught her hand, stilling their nervous movement. You don't have to do this. You could stay in the store with the children and let everyone else risk their lives for our safety. No. She reached up to touch his face. We stand together, remember. I remember. He kissed her deeply, then rested his forehead against hers. When this is over, we'll expand the store again and maybe give Samuel and Sarah another sibling. Despite everything, he laughed. Your confidence is terrifying sometimes. Someone has to balance out your brooding. They took their positions as the celebration began. To anyone watching, it looked like a normal Founders' Day, families picnicking, children playing merchants, selling wares. But Clara could see the tension beneath the surface, the way hands stayed close to hidden weapons, the way eyes constantly scanned the horizons. It was just past noon when it started. Morrison had been right about the ghost's plan and timing. They came from 3 directions at once, 22 men strong, expecting to catch the town completely off guard. Instead, they rode into a trap. The first shot came from James, positioned on the hotel roof. He dropped the ghost lieutenant before the man even cleared the town limits. Then the square erupted in controlled chaos. The townspeople scattered according to plan, taking cover behind pre-positioned barriers. The sharpshooters on the roofs opened fire. What the ghost had expected to be a slaughter became a desperate battle for survival, his survival. Clara played her part perfectly, screaming and running with Sarah's pram toward the designated safe zone. But when one of the ghost's men tried to grab her as a hostage, she shot him point blank with the hidden pistol, her expression never changing from terrified mother to cold killer and back again. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 20 minutes. Clara lost track of James in the gun smoke and chaos, focusing on protecting the children and picking off any outlaw who got too close to the medical station where the wounded were being treated. Then she heard it, James's voice carrying over the gunfire. Ghost face me if you have the courage. The shooting slowed, then stopped. Clara peered around her barrier to see James standing in the middle of the square, the ghost emerging from behind an overturned wagon. The ghost looked nothing like his half-brother where Tom Reeves had been polished and controlled. The ghost was wild-eyed and disheveled, driven by rage rather than calculation. The great James Mallory, the ghost sneered. You killed my brother. Your brother chose death when he threatened this town. He was family. Family doesn't mean you overlook evil, James said quietly, but his voice carried. Trust me, I know. You know nothing. You're just a killer pretending to be respectable. Maybe. But at least I'm trying to be better. What are you trying to be? The ghost's face contorted with rage. "Your executioner." He went for his gun faster than anyone Clara had seen except James himself. But James was faster still, his weapon clearing leather and firing in one smooth motion that spoke of years of practice and natural talent honed to perfection. The ghost staggered, looking down at the spreading red stain on his chest with surprise. You... I'm sorry, James said, and Clara could hear that he meant it. "I'm sorry you chose revenge over life. Your brother would have wanted better for you." The ghost fell to his knees, then forward into the dust. Around the square, his remaining men threw down their weapons, surrendering to the inevitable. It was over. The aftermath was both celebration and sorrow. 3 townspeople had been killed, including Mr. Chen from the laundry, who died protecting his daughters. 6 more were wounded, though Dr. Morrison expected them all to recover. Of the ghost gang, 8 were dead, 11 captured, and 3 had escaped in the chaos. "They'll spread word," Sheriff Watson said that evening, his arm in a sling but otherwise recovered. "No one will dare attack Redstone again." "Until the next one," James said quietly. He stood at the window of their apartment, watching the sun set over the town they'd defended once again. Clara joined him, Sarah in her arms, Samuel leaning against his father's leg. "There's always a next one. That's life." "I'm tired of it, Clara. Tired of killing, tired of fighting ghosts from my past." "Then stop." He turned to her, surprised. "Stop? Resign as marshal. Focus on the store, on our family. You've given enough, James. No one would blame you for choosing peace. The town needs merchants and teachers and families as much as it needs marshals. Billy can handle law enforcement. You can handle being a husband and father and shopkeeper." James was quiet for a long moment, then pulled his marshal's star from his vest, studying it in the dying light. It meant redemption. Proof that I could be more than a gunslinger. You proved that the moment you chose to stay in Redstone, the moment you chose love over violence. The star is just metal, James. Your redemption is in your choices, your family, your life. He looked at his children, Samuel watching him with those serious eyes so like his own, Sarah sleeping peacefully despite the day's violence. Then he looked at Clara, his wife, his anchor, his salvation. "You're right," he said simply, setting the star on the table. "You're always right." Not always, but often enough. The next morning, James officially resigned as marshal, recommending Morrison for the position in a move that shocked everyone. But Morrison had proved himself in the battle, and his knowledge of the outlaw world would be invaluable. "You trust me with this?" Morrison asked, holding the star like it might burn him. "I trust you to try," James said. "That's all any of us can do." With the marshal duties off his shoulders, James threw himself into the store's expansion with renewed energy. By autumn, Mallory and Monroe's Mercantile was the largest business in 3 counties, employing 6 people and serving as the unofficial center of Redstone's commercial district. Clara had worried that James would feel diminished without the badge, but instead he seemed lighter, younger somehow. He played with the children more, smiled more readily, and even started a youth group to teach boys and girls alike how to handle firearms safely, not to become gunfighters, but to be prepared, responsible citizens. "You're happy," Clara observed one evening in November, finding him reading to both children, Samuel practically asleep against his shoulder, while Sarah gurgled contentedly in his lap. "I am," he said, sounding slightly surprised. "I really am. No regrets about the badge." "None. Morrison's doing a good job, the town's safe, and I get to come home every night to my family. What more could I want?" "Well," Clara said, sitting beside him with a mysterious smile, "how about one more addition to that family?" James's eyes widened. Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday, due in late spring." "Clara Mallory, you're going to give me a heart attack." "Clara Mallory is going to give you another child to love, though we really need to expand the living quarters now." James laughed, rich and genuine. "We'll build a whole new house if we need to. Hell, we'll build a mansion." "I don't need a mansion, just room for our growing family and maybe a library." "A library? Well, we can't keep every book in the store. Bad for business if I refuse to sell my favorites." That winter was the happiest of Clara's life. The store thrived, the children grew, and James seemed to have finally made peace with his past. Even Margaret and Billy's announcement that they were expecting barely surprised anyone. Joy seemed to be infectious in the Mallory family. But life in the frontier was never without challenges. In February, a fire broke out in the hotel, threatening to spread to the whole street. James led the bucket brigade while Clara organized the evacuation of nearby buildings. Working together, the town saved most of the structures, though the hotel was a total loss. "We should rebuild it," Clara said that night, reviewing their finances. "The town needs a hotel. We have the money. It would be a good investment." James studied her. "You want to own a hotel?" "I want to own businesses that help Redstone grow. The store a hotel, maybe eventually a newspaper. An empire. A legacy. For our children." James pulled her close, mindful of her growing belly. "Have I told you lately that you're remarkable?" "Not since this morning." "Remiss of me. You're remarkable, Clara Mallory." The new hotel. The Redstone Grand began construction in March. Clara insisted on modern amenities, including indoor plumbing and gaslighting investments that James thought extravagant, but Clara insisted would pay off when the railroad arrived. She was right, of course. When the railroad Spur line finally opened in April, the Redstone Grand was booked solid within days. Travelers grateful for comfort after long journeys. It was during this busy time, just 2 weeks before Clara's due date, that the final ghost from James's past appeared. But this one came not with guns, but with papers. Clara was in the store when the well-dressed man entered, briefcase in hand, looking thoroughly out of place among the frontier shoppers. "I'm looking for James Mallory," he said in a cultured Eastern accent. "He's at the hotel construction site. Can I help you? I'm his wife." Mrs. Mallory, perfect. I'm Theodore Whitman, attorney at law from Boston." Clara's guard went up immediately. "And what does a Boston lawyer want with my husband?" "To give him an inheritance, actually." "Inheritance from whom?" "His maternal grandfather, Silas Thornton. He passed 6 months ago, and it's taken this long to track down Mr. Mallory." Clara sat down heavily, one hand on her belly, where the baby kicked restlessly. James's grandfather. He never mentioned. "I'm not surprised. There was a significant falling out when Mr. Mallory's mother married. Below her station, shall we say. But blood is blood, and with no other heirs, everything comes to your husband." Everything being approximately $50,000 and a shipping interest worth considerably more. Clara felt the room spin slightly. That was more money than she'd imagined existed in the world. When James heard the news, his reaction was not what she'd expected. Instead of joy or even surprise, his face went cold. "No." "James, that man disowned my mother for marrying for love. He left her to poverty and death rather than accept her choice. I don't want his money." "It's not his anymore," Whitman pointed out pragmatically. "It's yours. You can do with it what you will." "Then I refuse it." "You can't refuse it. It's already yours." "The estate is settled." James turned to Clara, his expression anguished. "This money is tainted, built on my mother's suffering." Clara took his hands, feeling them tremble slightly. "Then we'll clean it. We'll use it to help others to build something your mother would have been proud of." "How?" "A school. A real school for Redstone, where children like Samuel and Sarah can learn properly. An orphanage for children who have no one. A fund for women like Lila who need help starting over." She squeezed his hands. "We'll take your grandfather's cold money and turn it into warmth and hope." James stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "Practice?" She murmured against his chest. "And love." The inheritance changed everything and nothing. They remained in their apartment above the store, though they expanded it considerably. The promised school broke ground immediately, with Margaret agreeing to be its first teacher. The orphanage followed, run by Constance Harper, who decided to stay in Redstone permanently. "We're building something special here," Judge Harper said at the groundbreaking ceremony. "Not just buildings, but a community. A place where people can reinvent themselves, become who they're meant to be." His words proved prophetic 3 days later when Clara went into labor. This third child came fast, almost too fast, giving James barely time to fetch Dr. Morrison before the baby arrived. "Another boy." Dr. Morrison announced, handing the squalling infant to Clara. Healthy and loud. Like his father, Clara said, exhausted but exhilarated. Hey, James protested, mildly cradling his newest son. What should we name him? Thomas, Clara said without hesitation. James looked at her sharply. Thomas like a man who lost his way but might have been different with different choices. Our Thomas will have those choices. Thomas Michael Mallory, James agreed, emotion thick in his voice. For redemption and hope. As spring turned to summer, Redstone transformed from a frontier town to a small city. The railroad brought commerce and culture in equal measure. The Mallory businesses, the expanded mercantile, the hotel, and various investments anchored the commercial district. But more importantly, the institutions they'd founded, the school, the orphanage, the lending library, gave Redstone a soul. You've built an empire, Morrison said one evening, stopping by the store after his martial rounds. We've built a community, Clara corrected Thomas, sleeping in her arms while Sarah played with dolls, and Samuel helped James with inventory. Same thing, maybe. No, James said, looking up from his ledger. An empire is about power. A community is about people. Speaking from experience, Morrison asked with a slight smile. Speaking from learning, James replied. It was a week later during a particularly busy Saturday that Clara noticed the stranger. He was young, maybe 20, with the lean, hungry look of someone running from something. He lingered by the ammunition, his hand hovering near his gun, watching James with an intensity that made Clara's neck prickle. She moved casually to where the shotgun rested under the counter, catching James's eye. He followed her gaze, his expression not changing, but his posture shifting subtly. Can I help you? James asked the young man. You're James Mallory. I am. The gunslinger. Former gunslinger. I'm a shopkeeper now. The young man laughed bitterly. Right. The fastest gun in the West became a shopkeeper. Something funny about that. Everything. You were a legend. Now you're this. James set down his pen carefully. And what's wrong with this? It's a waste. All that skill, that reputation wasted on selling flour and fabric. I don't see it as waste. I see it as growth. The young man's hand moved to his gun. Prove you're still the legend. Draw. The store went silent. Clara's hand found the shotgun, but James made a small gesture. Wait. No. No, you're refusing. I'm refusing. I don't draw on children playing at being dangerous. I'm not a child. You're young enough to be my son, and you're making the same mistakes I made at your age, thinking violence makes you somebody. It made you somebody. It made me a killer. My family made me somebody. James moved slowly around the counter, hands visible and empty. What's your name, son? Why do you care? Because everybody has a name, a story, a choice to make about who they're going to be. The young man's hand trembled on his gun. David Carson. Well, David Carson, you've got two choices right now. You can try to draw on me, and even if you're faster, which you're not, you'll be gunning down an unarmed shopkeeper in front of his wife and children. That's the story you'll carry forever. Or you can let me buy you a meal, and we can talk about what you're really running from. For a long moment, nobody breathed. Then David's hand fell away from his gun, his shoulders sagging. I killed someone. In self-defense, but still. And now everyone expects me to be a gunfighter. I know that feeling, James said quietly. Come on, the hotel dining room does an excellent steak. As James led the young man out, he caught Clara's eye. She nodded, understanding. This was who James was now, not the gunslinger, not even the marshal, but a man who'd found his way and could help others find theirs. That evening, after David Carson had ridden out with a job offer from a ranch James knew and a different perspective on his future, Clara found James standing in front of the store watching the sunset paint Redstone in shades of gold. You saved that boy today, she said, joining him. Maybe. Or maybe he'll ignore everything I said and die in some pointless gunfight. But you tried. I had to. He was me 20 years ago. Angry, scared, thinking violence was the only answer. You were never that young. I was younger, in all the ways that mattered. Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the quiet strength that had nothing to do with how fast he could draw a gun. "Any regrets?" she asked, echoing a question from what felt like a lifetime ago. "None," James said firmly. Then, "Well, one." "What?" "I wish I'd found you sooner." "You found me exactly when you were supposed to, when you were ready to be found." From inside the store, they heard Sarah shriek with laughter as Samuel chased her with a toy horse and Thomas's baby gurgle of delight. The sounds of their life, their family, their future. "Mrs. Mallory," James said formally. "Mr. Mallory, would you care to dance?" "There's no music." "There's always music if you listen." And there in front of the mercantile where their story began, James and Clara danced to the music of their children's laughter, the evening breeze through the Colorado mountains, and the quiet contentment of two souls who'd found their way home to each other. Years later, when Samuel was grown and running the expanded Mallory business empire, when Sarah had become a doctor back east, when Thomas had taken over as sheriff of Redstone, people would still tell the story of the gunslinger and the shopkeeper. But by then, the details would have blurred into legend. Some said James had faced down 50 outlaws single-handed, others that Clara had tamed him with a single glance. The truth, as Clara would tell her grandchildren, was both simpler and more complex. Two broken people had chosen to build something whole together. A gunslinger had chosen love over violence. A shopkeeper had chosen courage over safety. And in that choosing again and again, through danger and joy loss and triumph, they had created something extraordinary, a family, a legacy, a love story for the ages. But on this evening, with the sun setting over Redstone and their children playing in the store, James and Clara weren't thinking about legacy or legend. They were simply dancing two people who'd found each other in an unlikely place and chosen to stay. "I love you, Clara Mallory," James whispered. "And I love you, James Mallory, forever and always." "Forever and always." He agreed and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of gunpowder and lavender, danger and safety, past and future, but mostly it tasted of home.